Can you guys hear stuff now? Oh no, this happened again, I think. Mm, 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 mm. Yes, can you hear me? Can you hear me? 1, 2, 3. OMG. Can you hear me now? Uh, okay, good. Now, well, I hear how much noise there's in the background of my fan, so I'm going to turn off my fan. Give me a second. My roommate's cat is stuck in my room. Did he run out? Yeah, he did. Okay, I'm back. I apologize for that. That sucked. But that's how things be, I guess. Oh, okay, so where was I last? Yeah, I was going to talk to my friends about with politics, those who know a lot more than me. Oh, you guys didn't hear me, so I have to start over again. Okay. um, so tonight, I was originally planning to talk about what was happening in Russia. And it's, kind of a big deal. So the title of this video changed. It didn't change. What was going on changed because, for those who don't know, a mercenary group that's paid by Russia early this morning took control of a city and pushed towards Moscow. Almost like a little rebellion for the hearts and mind of the Russian people. At least that's what the leader of the Wagner group, this mercenary group, thought they were doing. And things have changed. It's not as tenuous as it was before, but there's so much. So it's super interesting, and I want to talk about it with two of my two really good friends who work in politics. They're involved in politics. They went to school for politics, political science. They have connections with the international community, and to hear what they have to say on the topic, I think is much more interesting than what I have to say. I'm not the best political thinker, and these guys, to me, are masters. But before that, I'm supposed to talk with Juan Docio. Juan Docio is someone who comes in the Pangburn Discord a lot, and he and I got into a little argument, I think it was last night, about minimum wage and whether minimum wage is a good idea or a bad idea. And he keeps bringing up Thomas Sowell. For those who don't know, Thomas Sowell is like one of those, how do I say it? Mimi right-wing intellectual, right? This is like the guy they bring up over and over and over again because it's Thomas Sowell, the right-wing intellectual who talks about economics in a way that's advantageous to our political notions, right? Political economists very much don't all agree that minimum wage is bad. If anything, Nobel Prizes have been won about thinking differently about minimum wage and about being able to do very interesting contemporary analysis of the issue, which is much better than the way they were doing analysis in the 80s. A lot of people forget that in science, it's not just technology that propels our knowledge forward, but rather a lot of times like developing new, in a way, research technologies like statistical methods, ways of doing analysis. And that's why we're seeing science be very much different today, especially social sciences and political sciences as compared to how it was in the 80s or 70s. So he is on his way home. I just messaged him and I'll bring him on. I'll find a way to talk to him through Discord or whatever it might be, and we'll have the conversation. But before that happens, I recently, across my face, this woman who I don't know her name. I think her name is Emma. She does the Majority Report with Sam Cedar. Sam Cedar's Majority Report is a political news show on YouTube. They're like the Ben Shapiro / Tim Pool equivalent on the left, but they have like guests come on and they talk to them. And they're very, like, the first hour of the show is super dry or whatever. But Emma went and spoke on Tim's Pool podcast. And in specific circles, there's a lot of like, oh, Emma owned Tim Pool, or Tim Pool owned Emma from the Majority Report. So I thought let's cover that, talk about that a bit. So let's see how that went, and let's talk over it, some of my opinions and ideas about it. Oh, the Casey, she fucking pwned him. Let's see how she pwned him. Because, Tim Pool is a slimy motherfucker. Very, very, very slimy with the way he argues. But, let's see. And I know the Majority Report is also based in New York. So I'm from New York. So that'd be nice to hear her take on some of New York politics. Here it is. Okay. Queen. So Tim Pool Emma. Okay. You see, yeah, owned. Here, let's see the Tim Pool one. Let's see the actual one. Let's go over the actual video. Let's see. Okay. Huh. It's not picking up the pip for whatever reason.
I'm back! First.
Oh my god, Tim Pool just yelled into my earlobes. Fuck. Properties. Picture in picture. Yeah, the same one. Why is it not? This? No. There we go. Oh, now you can see him. Okay, let's see this. He just destroyed my earlobes. My earlobes hurt so much, not because of Tim Pool. Fuck. Okay.
First thing I want to say is thank you to Jack Posobiec and Seamus Coughlin for guest hosting Timcast IRL while I was out. I wasn't not, in fact, dead. I just lost my voice, and that really sucked. I think on Sunday I was kind of sick, and it sucked, so I just hung out and was playing video games all day. But then Monday I was talking like this, and then I figured I'd be fine by Tuesday, and then come Wednesday morning when I still couldn't talk, we were like, we need to call in the big guns. So we reached out to some people to see if they would guest host for us. And we got some people. We got Jack and Seamus. So thank you all for that. This is the first.
Yeah, I couldn't give a fuck about everything this guy's just talking about right now. Let's try to skip forward to see anything other than like Tim Pool housekeeping shit. That's as irrelevant to me as anything else.
And I'm not saying this to be like mean. I'm saying if he doesn't know how to turn revenue, the issue is more so you need like a COO or somebody who's who also
here?
We so that we can actually get to introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Emma Vigeland. I'm the co-host of the Majority Report. Thanks so much, Tim, for having me on. I know that it was a little dicey with you and Sam in terms of him coming on, but I'm happy.
For those who don't know, there's drama here. Last time Tim Pool and Sam Cedar talked, Tim Pool looked like a fucking idiot, where he was literally like an argument for him about something against some type of collectivism or whatever it is was, most bad guys in the movies are like collectivists, as if that's an argument. That was like the main argument. It's like, yeah, people in the movies are collectivists. That's why you shouldn't be a collectivist or some bullshit like that.
Yeah, that you had me on. Honestly.
Absolutely, I'm glad you came.
Yeah, and it's. I just want to clear this up because I know that you didn't want to have Sam on because you called him a grifter, right? Yeah. And part of the reason that you called him that is because you said that we put your song through a filter on our show, and I just want you to know, I was hosting that day. We don't have the technology to do that, so I did not do that. So there you go.
Yeah, it was
clearing
like
that up for you.
the song. So that specific issue was the song we put out, played on your show, had like the mids ripped out of it.
We don't have the technological ability to do that. We're just a bunch of leftists with like a soundboard. I promise you, nothing was intentional.
You don't have Audacity; it's free.
Well, no. The issue here is likely
I don't really
that
know. I don't know anything about.
If you don't have proper ingestion, then like the audio is going through a TV or something, it's going to sound really bad.
Right.
So if we were to like play music on the TV and then put the mics up to it.
So is he upset that like his music sounded bad? What the fuck
Everything would be ripped out from it. That's what
I think.
Okay.
But it's interesting that even though
why do they assume that everyone who's watching this follows their drama all day? Like I don't know what's going on with this like music or whatever it might be.
Played it, that was your justification for calling Sam a grifter.
It's not though. The issue with Sam was that I put out a tweet where I said
It seems like they're upset about something. Tim Pool's upset that on her show they played a bad song of him. I don't even know what's happening. Like I'm just trying to skip right through all of this. This is just irrelevant to me. Yeah, I think he's upset that music got a bad rap. Exactly.
Product to a customer does not mean that one political faction has more or is great.
Oh, so now they're talking about why he's more successful. Okay.
Here is more attractive to investors and advertisers. I mean, we're basically only members and other right-wing media like the Daily Wire and stuff like that. And even what I'm looking at a Rumble, what I don't know, what do you call that? Logo right there.
Looks like a rectangle.
I mean, that's a David Sachs. That's a venture capital backed venture, I believe. At the very least, Peter Thiel is involved and invested.
Wait,
there's no equivalent on the left.
Why wouldn't
Absolutely
you be able
not.
to get advertisers if like David Pakman and the Young Turks have advertisers? Your content's not like too
We do
dissimilar.
have advertisers. We just have, advertisers that are a little bit more within our system of values. And we're trying to combat corporate greed. We don't have a ton of advertisers that I think align with.
Okay, so what she's saying here is that right-wing online media platforms are much more successful than left-wing ones because they have more advertising and money behind it. Yes, that's a fact. That is a fact. The right-wing online media ecosystem is way, way, way more organized, way more polished than the left-wing equivalent. I think a lot of people, especially on the right, see like CNN, CBS, NPR, New York Times, BBC as some type of like left organizations. They're not. They're literally not left-wing organizations. No. Globally, they're conservative news sources, period. And in the United States, they're like center left, a little bit leaning. Like it's not a left-leaning coalition. There's no equivalent to Fox News. Let's put it that way. There is no equivalent to Fox News. Juan is ready for the conversation, so let's open that up. Go in to 1v1. Okay. So we're gonna bring Juan on, and we can start this conversation around minimum wage. Should be fun. I'm just going to drag him in. Okay. Pop the window out. Close this. Sorry, guys. Always takes time to set these things up. If I had, some money, could get all that Elgato Stream Deck shit. Just press buttons and have it all move to where it needs to move and set up some macros. I would. But alas, I do not have that skill. I do not have that ability. So. Okay. Juan, are you there? Juan Docio? Hello, hello, hello. Hello? He doesn't seem to be there. Okay. Maybe he can't hear me. And hopefully that's it. Oh, he just left the chat. I guess he's coming back in. Okay. Oh, hello? Yes, I can hear you now. Give me 1 second.
Do you want answering?
Yeah, I couldn't hear a thing you were saying. You want to turn on your video?
1 second. I'm putting on a light bulb in the restroom.
I got you. Just so you know, I am live streaming for like 2 people who you know. So it's
For like
Perry.
who?
2 people. It's Perry and Casey. You know who they are.
I love a discussion because now we can go back to it. I'm always so
exactly.
high I can never remember what I say. And and it's sometimes useful to you know what? This is the wrong light bulb. Okay, doesn't matter.
Can you turn on your camera?
Yeah. Here we go.
Oh,
right.
There you are. The whole world sees you now.
No, the whole 2 of them. All right.
The whole 2 of them, yeah.
All right, we'll just be here. And I'll pull up my computer, and it'll be great.
Yes, 100%. How have you been, by the way? How's your day going?
I've been great. I just spilled a little bit of stuff. I just came from my girlfriend's house. But I'm chilling. It's a normal Saturday for me.
Nice.
Been chilling. How about you? What do you
Oh man, I actually we're having a few guests over, my friends and I, someone that I knew a while back, and they're coming over, so they're like, "Oh, Dandan, you want to cook something for like dinner, lunch, or whatever it is?" And I love cooking, so I was like, let me go a little ham in. So I went out, I bought like all the ingredients. I decided to have like a play on like a Mediterranean dish with Mexican flavors. So I made it like, you know what elote is?
Elote? Yeah, I like corn.
Exactly, the Mexican street corn. So I was like,
Yeah.
What if I make like a elote flavored corn sauce with cojito cheese and spice, and then
you need it. I wish I had more friends like you around me.
Yeah, I'm like, I'm gonna sear some salmon on it.
Oh God. Damn, I'm still used to the college meal lifestyle. You know.
Oh, are you?
I really do. I really need to get further into the gastro experience, you know.
I mean, you're from Argentina. You should be all into that like food life and food culture.
Yeah, you know, I feel like it's still pretty bland, you know. Like meat only has so much variety. Like it's all at the end of the day kind of like chewy, umami thing, you know.
True. So you have no but there's more to Argentinian food than just like, you know, asado and like sitting outside and grilling meats for the whole day.
You're not wrong. There's definitely a lot to the cuisine. I just have not explored it, and I think the more cuisine aspect to it is honestly just like a rob of European cuisine, you know.
A rob of European cuisine. Interesting.
Yeah. Like all the dishes that I've actually ever liked that my parents have cooked, I've been like, oh, how did you learn this? Or where did you get this from? And it's always just some Spanish or some Italian dish, you know? And so I feel like the best parts are probably just not legitimate. All right.
I don't know about that, though.
Yeah, me neither. I haven't actually looked into, like I said, the cast.
Neither have I. I don't. The closest I know to like Argentinian cuisine is a good friend of mine is from Brazil. Mm-hmm. So I know there is very crossovers in the way their cultures and food as Argentina. So.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Well, they're right there.
They're right there next to each other.
I'll do it.
Okay. So just so you know, so like before coming on here, I was like, hey, you know, Juan was bringing up Thomas Sowell. I know he's going to talk about him, so I took the time to like look up his argument. I have like a Word document set up, and I looked up stuff like that, so we can just letting you know I did that. So I actually want to have a conversation.
I'm glad you did that. Did you get a chance at reading the article I sent you? It's a summary of part of his book.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and then I watched like a YouTube video on it, and I was like, I'm aware of this argument.
Beautiful. I was honestly, since I sent it to you, and I realized that you were somewhat serious, and you mentioned live streaming it, I've spent like a few minutes like Googling counter
Okay.
arguments.
Mhm.
And I've been talking with my girlfriend about counter arguments. Um, and I failed to really do good work in that, honestly. I'm not gonna lie to you. And so I'm super excited to hear your your arguments, you know. I'm down
You know,
to understand
it's
what
less that I
limits of
have.
this.
You know, it's important to note that, especially when we're talking about economy, we're not talking
Mhm.
about systems where there's like you can just point to like an atom, right? Studies are going to be varying.
Yeah,
Both studies that are both valid can have
yeah,
conflicting notions. But I think that when we're talking about like economy in general, we need to talk about trade-offs. Like,
okay, yeah.
what is the trade-off of not increasing the minimum wage as opposed to increasing the minimum wage?
Right. This is
What
actually a
certain
lot of what my counter arguments ended up being, right? Because I don't think that the claims that Thomas Sowell makes are incorrect, right? I think they're bared out by the fact that, at least by the article and the the paper that is discussed in the article I sent you. Like, I think it's shown that in Seattle, at least, the minimum wage had like bad effects, right? That it ended up producing less money for the workforce, at least in those two capital years. And so I think that to some degree, although that might be true, there might be some harm, right? There might be some ultimate, let's say, weight that is not being picked up by
okay.
by the reality of removing minimum wage. And I think that that's probably where
So
you're
for those who haven't, you know, seen us talk about this, I don't know what we talked about the other day.
yeah,
How
yeah,
about we, I think, start off by just, you know, going over Soul's main arguments.
of course.
Right. So
So
I think
yeah,
doing that would be, so let me show you what I've written down, and I guess we can move forward from there.
beautiful. Let's do it.
So the first thing I wrote was, Soul argues that minimum wage laws lead to a decrease in employment opportunities, particularly for low-skilled workers. He just suggests that when the government mandates a higher minimum wage, it becomes more expensive for businesses to hire workers, especially those with limited skills or experience. As a
Right.
result, employers may be less inclined to hire or reduce their workforce, leading to higher unemployment rates among vulnerable groups.
Correct. That's a big part of the argument, and why it is that that's the case, I think also matters, right? It's a fact about limiting competition between employers and employers and employees, right?
Hmm.
But continue.
No, yeah. So
Yeah.
you would agree that that's a good
I would agree.
categorization of the
Yeah, I would
argument.
agree that that's like, I would say that's the symptom, right?
Yeah, that if you lower minimum wage, that's the
Yeah.
effect that it's going to have in
That's
a
the
way.
effect. Yeah, that's the effect. Now, why it
Yes.
is that happens, I think we can further discuss. Yeah.
Yeah. Why? Okay. So, why do you think that happens? Like, what do you think is the main driver? Like, what evidence, what research exists out there that
Yeah.
supports this?
Right. So again, I'm going off of this argument that I got many years ago, honestly, from Thomas Sowell, and that I haven't been able to disprove. But the example that he works with, Thomas Sowell actually doesn't in his book mention this example. I think it's something that comes after the fact. 2015 example in which Seattle raised minimum wages to $13 to $11 an hour, and then to
Mhm.
$13 an hour after a few years. And basically, the effects that they saw was unemployment increased, and
Okay.
the amount of work hours that were provided to the workers decreased, and ultimately, the money that employees took home was less than what it was in the previous years. What Sol does in his book is he goes off of census data. He goes off of census data because actually, you know, minimum wage has been a thing since 38, right? Since for a long time, there's been the idea of minimum wage.
Yeah, of course.
And he talks about the years previously, right before minimum wage, which was actually a recession, and then he compares that to subsequent years for these unskilled populations, right? Unskilled and marginalized populations, especially, like, for example, women and Black people.
Okay, yeah. So
Yeah.
what's interesting about this is that when I was doing my research for that is while the census data is one way to try to measure this phenomena, there's actually a professor and an economist who I think his name is, what was his name? Paul Krugman, who won a Nobel laureate in his paper and his research around the effects of minimum wage on a population. So in this, for example, also, here, let me find exactly the article. I think I should have it somewhere. Open up.
Yeah, I'll look up his name on, and then
I have so many things open. It's unbelievable. Sometimes I wish I had 15 computers for streaming, so I can have a book.
Yeah, I found a New York Times article. Maybe they have a citation here.
Yeah, the New York Times talked about it with Kruger. He talks about the minimum wage.
Can't believe New York Times isn't down to go free. Biggest
no, it's
mistake
not.
that I've made.
So they talk about here. I'll read it out loud. I have it right here. David Carr of the University of California, Berkeley, and I, which is Kruger, found that when New Jersey raised its minimum wage from $4.25 to $5 an hour in 1992, or from about $7 to $8 today, job growth at fast food restaurants in the state was just as strong as it is at the restaurants across the border in Pennsylvania, where the minimum wage remained the same. Equally important, but less well known, within New Jersey, job growth was just as strong at low-wage restaurants that were constrained by the law to raise its pay as at higher-wage restaurants that were not directly affected by the increase, since their workers were already earned more than the new minimum.
So you said New Jersey and where? New Jersey and
Pennsylvania.
Okay. One sec. Do you know what year it was?
1992.
92. Okay.
So his main argument basically just that it's not necessary. If we have found empirical evidence to show that they did raise the minimum wage, but there was no effect on.
So there was no effect?
No, it was just as strong. Okay. People didn't lose employment.
Okay, so hold on. Yeah, can you maybe link me that thing? I'd like to see details about how
I'll send you. It is in the New York Times article. How can
I just couldn't open the New York Times.
How can I share it? Share my screen both for you and for my chat. I'm trying to think about that.
So
I did it. It worked.
Amazing.
You
did it. Yeah. So the federal minimum wage has been okay. Research suggests. Click on the research suggests.
Yes, I did that before. It's open somewhere else.
Yeah.
We can go ahead and explore this together.
Yeah, I think it's only showing me this screen right now.
Yeah, research suggests. There we go.
Good, there we go.
I can only pause it.
Okay.
Go away.
Here we go. Give me 1 second. By a wide range of measurements.
I should be able to send this to you. I should be able to send this to you now.
That would be amazing.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm just.
Where's the message?
Turning up my camera. I just realized. Right. So what do you? Let's say your study is relevant, right? Let's say it was shown that in some calendar year, minimum wage was increased $1 and it had no effects on employment rates or employment hours, which are both. I think that's what I wanted to make sure your article mentioned, not just employment workers, but employment hours. It's not that it's not just measuring the employment rates, but the hours paid by employers to employees, right? I think that's also a relevant measure, because it's not just that they're hiring less people; it's that the people that they have hired, they're giving them less hours also, right? So you have to account for both of those. And what I would say is, surely you're a $1 difference. I mean, I don't know what $1 difference in 92 would be accounted for in 2023. Probably a few more dollars.
Maybe. But I think
the objective of
I think what this research shows, and I would say that research is done outside of censuses, which are self-reporting. Yeah. Is research that should be trusted more than research from a census data. And what Tomasola is doing is he has an empirical piece of evidence, and then he's trying to
What do you think about the
map
Seattle,
that on
the
with
Seattle,
reasoning?
What do you think about the Seattle study?
I think it tells us that the variable here isn't minimum wage.
I think it clearly indicates that it's a 9% difference, right? That's like,
Yeah, but
I don't know
if
a deviation of that. I could tell you that. Fine, I can find that. But like, and it's also a 2015 study. It's not a $4 to $5 difference. It's a $9 to $11 difference, right? I think that I would say it has more relevance. Also, my understanding of the point of the minimum wage is so that the lowest paid individual is paid enough to have a livable wage, right? That's my understanding of the purpose of the minimum wage, right? And I think the purpose is flawed at its core, because the idea of the lowest rung of workers being enabled to pay enough diminishes how low that rung can go. And the lower you can set the ability for employers to hire employees, the more chances employees have to climb up that ladder, right? I think I've heard a video in which Thomas Sowell mentioned something like McDonald's workers that would be hired to flip burgers on January would not be like flipping burgers by December, right? If they show up on time, they get along with their workers, they demonstrate their utility to the employer, that their job prospects increase and they can argue for a higher wage. That opportunity is not allocated to them if the employer is required to pay an exorbitantly high amount for that first year of work.
Okay.
That's my understanding. But just to bring up
But
your article again.
I don't quite understand what that
Mm-hmm.
necessarily has to do with like the effect of raising minimum wage, because at the end of the day, these companies, most people who buy food at McDonald's are people who are poor. Let's just put it strictly.
You're wrong. I mean, everybody buys food at McDonald's, right? It's not like
No, No, yeah, but
there's no classism in McDonald's.
yeah, there is.
Elon Musk eats McDonald's on a frequent. Surely,
I don't know
like,
about that. But
Warren Buffett.
I think
eats
the
McDonald's
point
on a
I'm trying to get
frequent
across.
basis, right?
Sure, whatever. I'm wrong. Everyone eats McDonald's. The point here is that just like in Henry Ford's time, when he raised the price of people who worked in his factory because now they could start buying his products. This is what raising the minimum wage does. It helps small businesses. Right? They can stimulate. They can stimulate consumer demand,
right?
And boost economic activity.
Right. I don't have the concern with the lowest rung being increased. Right. Like, for example, a company like Amazon increasing their minimum wage, or a company like McDonald's or Walmart. Right. Like big conglomerates, corporations increasing their minimum wage. I'm all for that. What I'm not for is government enforced limitations between the contract of the employee.
Yeah, but now we're moving away. Now you're trying to take this into
I think it's the
ethics.
same thing. No,
Ethics and contracts.
No, it's not about ethics, right? It's about money. It's about the ability of the least employable people to find a job, right? If you make it so that employers have to pay a higher and higher wage, the ability for the least skilled workers,
least skilled workers should still have a standard of living.
They should.
And
to start with,
low skill.
I can demonstrate to you
one
that
second.
least skilled
I'm not
workers-
sure, but low skilled workers are very easily replaceable.
By what?
And what do you mean they're replaceable? Because it's low skill job.
Okay, sure, but they're also cheap. What do you mean?
Yeah. So when we say they're cheap and they're very, very replaceable, you can start paying them $9 an hour. You can start driving the price down lower than what it would be than anybody would take, because you're low skill, your job is replaceable. So without that minimum wage, that federally put minimum wage about what money is relevant to the standard of living that any basic human being should have in this country, right?
this is my thing. This is my thing. You think that there should be a government quota? There should be like
There should be a minimum wage, of course.
yeah, I guess that is what we're talking about. My bad.
That's what we're talking about. I believe in a minimum wage.
No, of course, of course. You think that if you think that the way that we should help the person who is starving is by requiring employers to pay them enough.
No, that if someone is working for that's not what I said. If someone is working for anyone and they're working their 30 hours a week, they shouldn't be unable to rent an apartment. They shouldn't be not able to have healthcare.
I think that's okay. The reasoning why you say that is you want to help them, right? You want to give them healthcare. You want to provide a livable wage, an ability for them to be able.
Oh, you're cutting in and out there. You're starting to cut in and out. I can't hear you
their
at all.
Ability. You can't hear me at all?
No, you got to start. Go back 5 seconds.
Okay. You think that you're trying to help the lower skilled workers, right? You're trying to provide them healthcare. You're trying to give them a livable wage. And you don't realize that by requiring employers to pay a certain amount, you're removing the low skilled workers' ability to climb the ladder. You're removing their ability to ever have a step in the first place into the ladder in which they can demonstrate themselves to the employers. Because look at this.
Of course you can.
Dan, please,
okay.
hold on. Hear me out for a moment.
Okay.
I'll let you interrupt me. Just hold on.
Okay.
If you increase the minimum wage, right? You set it to $15 an hour. All the people who were earning below $15 an hour, let's say it was $11 an hour before that, all the people that were earning 11, 12, 13, 14 are now competing with the people who couldn't get the jobs or who had the jobs at $11 an hour, right? So all the people who were working and had a higher skill, they had like some way of demonstrating to their employers, hey, I'm not worth 12, I'm worth 13. Hey, I'm not worth 14, I'm worth 15. All of those people.
Yeah, I'm not worth 15.
Hold on.
I'm not. No, you have.
Hold on.
Okay.
What I'm just trying to say, all of those people are now competing for the same $15 an hour job, right? And so who would the employer go with? Would the employer go with the people who are least skilled or with the people who were already earning $14 an hour? Why the incentive is obviously in employing the higher skilled. I'm already having to pay 15. This guy isn't worth 15 either way. He was getting 14 before and this other guy was getting 11 before. I'm obviously going to go with the higher skilled. You're incentivizing employers to value unskilled labor less. Continue. Sorry.
I really don't see how that follows because there's this race to the bottom, right? Especially in low skilled labor, where it's how little can I, because it's not like someone comes on time and whatever. These jobs are replaceable. Low skilled labor, they need work. There's always someone who's willing to fill in those jobs. They're usually not that much struggling to find the cashier at McDonald's. Someone needs the work. Someone needs to work. And without a minimum wage, everyone is competing with someone who's willing to work for a penny, right? And at that point, what it's doing is it's driving to. Okay,
hold on.
But I didn't cut you off, and I let you finish speaking. Juan, right. I'm really trying to be nice and I'm not trying to cut you off. So
right.
There becomes a race to the bottom. There's this concept called where is it? It's called. I just had this. Yeah, here it is. Monopsony. And monopsony is power in the low-wage labor market. Monopsony occurred when there is a single or dominant buyer of labor, right? Employers possess monopsony power, which allows them to pay lowered wages. In such cases, a higher minimum wage could counteract this power imbalance and ensure fairer and fair compensation for workers, right? Because what ends up happening with that minimum wage is that employers just a race to the bottom, especially if there's a sector of let's say, and we see this in like gardening, for example. It's a race to them on how little can I pay these people. and people are going to take the work, and that's why they hire illegal immigrants. There's all these different sectors that control this labor market and then just shoot the prices down as far as they can. A minimum wage ensures that a person's time on a basic level, it gives them the ability to be a participant in a market and make market decisions. Because a person that's making $9 an hour, $8 an hour, can't make market decisions. They can't participate in the market. They can't possibly do it. They're literally living. They're living to work. They're just working so they can barely live. They can't actually participate in the market. This is where minimum wage helps out the economy. It creates workers who can actually participate in the economy.
I think that you're actually incorrect in saying that. And the reasoning why I think you're incorrect in saying that is employers, when you demand employers to pay more, the people who used to be paid under that minimum wage are now also competing with the people who were actually getting paid the minimum wage. They're both now applying to jobs, right? They're both now they're both now like competing for the same jobs because there's no jobs that are able to pay under that minimum wage. And so why would the employer hire someone who is less skilled? The less skilled worker is hurt. I think a very important aspect of this is you are confusing competition being between the employer and the employee. And that's not the competition. The competition is between the employee and the employee, right? And the high-skilled employee is trying to demonstrate that he's more skilled, and the low-skilled employee is trying to demonstrate that he's more worthwhile for a lower pay.
I'm not talking about I'm not talking about competition between employees and employers. I didn't say that.
Okay.
It's between employers. It's between employees. It's between employers, employees, and then in negotiations, it's between. Like that's kind of where the competition is. There's an area like when a company needs to hire someone, they're in demand for a laborer, and when a laborer wants to buy something, they're in demand for a product or a service or whatever it might be. So I'm not saying that they're in competition with one another. I'm not saying that employees and employers are in competition. What I am saying is that in a situation by where
hold on. The reason that I was saying that was mainly because you weren't showing that, or at least I didn't think you were showing, that there is a competition going on between employers, right? It's not that, and again, I wasn't saying that employers and employees are I wasn't saying that you were saying that employers and employees were competing. I was just saying you weren't, actually I did say that, I think. But what I meant to say was, yeah, I did. But what I meant to say is you're failing to realize that the actual paradigm is employees, employees, employers, employers, right? And the fact that it's employers, employers are competing with other employers to hire employees. This race to the bottom that you're talking about. And let's say I'm hiring farmers, right, to pick berries.
Because they control a labor sector, right? So
how do they control the labor sector?
So for example, fast food workers, right?
Yeah.
They control a labor area. They control it. They do, like for low skilled, so the low skilled labor market involves low skilled jobs. Let's look at the low skilled food realtor stuff. Okay, like you go work at McDonald's, right? No one says, let me see, McDonald's has these benefits over Burger King, over Wendy's, right?
Yeah, you're wrong.
No.
People do them.
No, people. Okay, no one is like really saying, I'm not going to work in any of these places because of this. They're just gonna say, I'm gonna pick one, and these people are replaceable. These are replaceable jobs. As sad as it is, the reality is, if you've been working at McDonald's for 2 years, right, and you want to I want to raise because I'm valuable. They go, no, get out. Your job is replaceable. They don't. Their turnover rate in these businesses are big. The turnover rate in low skilled labor is massive because they do just fire people all the time.
Okay. The McDonald's hires 100% internally. 100%. every manager in McDonald's was a McDonald's employee before. Every like corporate person was something like another lower skilled. Like they all hire internally. There's 100% turnover in terms of McDonald's. Literally only hires people that they had initially hired. It's a rule they have, a policy.
I mean, that's just McDonald's. No, if you're turnover means that people are quitting. And like if someone gets fired, a new person comes in, is replaceable. A lot of their jobs outside of like administrative, which is people with degrees, okay,
yes,
are people who there's massive turnover rate. You're not gonna see. You're very seldomly like to see
paid minimum wage. The people who are getting paid minimum wage, I feel like you have this conception are like single mothers, and all these people that are barely are. The majority of people who get paid minimum wage are young people, they're minorities, they're unskilled workers, right? They don't have degrees, they have very little work experience, right?
And
these people, what I'm trying to say is these people are hurt more, right, by an increase in competition. They're the people who are hurt the most by an increase in competition, and that's exactly what you do when you increase minimum wage.
But we just okay. So it seems to me like you're no longer arguing for not having a minimum wage, rather you're arguing for a radical increase. Against a radical increase. But what if we did this? What if we said, hey, we want to raise the minimum wage by $5 over the next 10 years, and we incrementally year by year raise it a few cents. Or it's whatever it is, or we bring it closer to the line of inflation to account for inflation for a standard of living.
Okay.
You don't know that people are not gonna be, that companies are there's gonna increase this massive competition between low skilled labor, because there's no real competition between them. They're low skilled laborers. They are replaceable.
There's no real competition between low skilled laborers.
No, there isn't.
I think there is. I think there's
what are they competing with? I show up on time.
Yes, I show up on time.
But you're anyhow
with my workers.
But you're anyhow gonna get someone. He's not gonna show up on time. You fire him and you move on. But that would be at $9 or that would be at $15.
Okay.
Just because I raise it, it doesn't mean all of a sudden now I'm never gonna hire any low skilled workers. I still need to. I just can't pay them.
No,
trash.
but now I can hire slightly better skilled workers because I'm having to pay them the same amount as I was before anyway. Also, this doesn't account for price increasing, right? Like the price of gas automatically increases every time that, like, at least in the neighboring regions of where, I mean, I have another paper on this.
Yeah, as the company is losing, because the company is going to maintain its profits, so they increase and decrease crass. Okay, a company
because you can't force the company to spend their money a certain way.
But the difference is gasoline is not human beings. Labor and gasoline might be human beings. Labor, people selling their labor is not the same as a company who's selling gasoline. Do you not see the difference here?
The reason I mentioned gasoline is because gasoline is a typical market indicator of the price, right? Like when the gasoline price rises, everything rises. When the gasoline price lowers, everything lowers. That's why I mentioned gasoline.
I don't understand.
I feel like
I don't understand what this has to do with. I don't understand what this has to do with
what I'm
labor.
trying to say is prices increase. Prices increase when you increase minimum wage.
No,
so
but
everything, the milk costs more.
Why would the milk cost more? Milk is subsidized. Milk can't cost more. There's a maximum price on milk.
Because it takes more gas to. You're right. Milk is subsidized, but like milk costing more.
Just if they increase minimum,
goes up.
Why would gas prices increase? To keep the shareholders and the marginal top rate higher. It's not to say that
they increase because they have who are paid the least have to be paid more now.
Yeah, the people who paid the least have to pay more are not the majority share of where the money goes to in these companies to begin with. And second of all,
the majority share. Okay.
So if my gas prices are not going to increase because the one guy sitting inside the store has to now get $15 an hour, and if he does, that is an indictment. No, that is an indictment on the company that's selling the gasoline because they can cut prices somewhere else. Okay, so what's wrong? So what's the issue with the minimum wage? Because some assholes in a company are going to raise the price? Because
the price isn't set by assholes. The price is set by the market. It's what the
do you think that after the Great Depression they should have not have put a minimum wage in place? Because I don't think you're arguing for no minimum wage. I think you're talking about a severe increase.
Right. I think the minimum wage law right after the Great Depression decreased the ability of black teenagers to find employment and climb the ladder, and to a large degree has probably increased generational wealth because of the same
argument. Where do you get this stuff?
Thomas Sowell.
Have you tried to verify those? Have you looked at the other, I don't study
data
Thomas Sowell.
From 1938 to 1960? Yes, I actually looked at the census data.
But the census data from the 1930s cannot be your basis for empirical observation.
Why not?
Because there are better methods today.
Government
Juan,
data, Dan.
There's better 1930s data as data from contemporary times. Other countries have minimum wage. They don't have these problems. Okay. Look at countries all over the world who set a minimum wage where there's a livable wage.
I think there's an issue with bringing up other countries because there's other an entirety of other laws. There's an entirety of another tax code, an entirety of a different.
Juan, countries are not that different. They're mostly still countries who run with parliaments and economy. I mean, black youth were barred from things like being lawyers. Sure, 1 second.
You don't have any.
Jim Crow. Right, I just have to say this because Jim Crow existed into the 1960s. The minimum wage is not what caused black communities to suffer in the latter half of the 20th century. It didn't. It was Jim Crow. It was racism. Okay. It was segregation. They literally couldn't drink from the same fucking water fountains, let alone go to the same schools. So this is where I'm saying, where did you get that from? You just said that as if it's straight facts because you've seen Thomas Sowell talk about it.
Can we look at a video together? I'll tell you exactly where I got it from. A video. I got it from a video interview.
But I don't want to know. That's where I got it. But to watch a whole video about Thomas Sowell right now, I mean, sure, you can put it on.
It's like a 4-minute video. It'll be super short, and it'll show you. It'll be basically Thomas Sowell saying what I'm saying better.
Yeah, but I know. But there's a difference part between saying I'm looking for what is the empirical evidence is bringing to even substantiate
census data, literal census data.
But when we looked at other studies, not from the 1930s, not census data from the 1980s, but studies that don't just use census data, use metrics and research, they saw that in New Jersey and in New York, for example, when the minimum wage went up. In 92. It didn't happen in 92. But
why did it happen in 2015?
What do you mean? Why did it happen in 2015?
Why was it shown to decrease the money given to the workforce in 2015 and in 2016 and 2017, and again, confirmed in 2018 when the study was revisited from the article I initially sent you from AEI.org.
Okay, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't mean that
right here.
If we have 1 second,
by Jardman.
If we have correlative studies, because you're talking about a correlative study or a directional, they account for the other variables. I mean, the key finding: a federal minimum wage of $12 in 2020 returned wage floor to the same position in 1962, whatever.
Here,
68.
Visit the link I just sent you. That's the paper that I think is the most substantial evidence on my case, right? Why it is that minimum wage would have a negative effect for the minimum.
Okay, I'll have to read this. I can't just read this right now.
Well, okay, let's read the abstract together, right? We can go into the methodology and stuff later.
This paper evaluates the wage employment and hours effects. Let me put this up on whatever. I'll just read it. This paper evaluates the wage employment and hour effects of the first and second phase of the blah, blah, blah. We estimate an effect of 0 when analyzing employment in the restaurant industry at all wage levels comparable to many prior studies.
You just read the last sentence. What the fuck?
No, I'm going. Evidence attributes. I'm working backwards because I don't want to hear other nonsense.
You don't work backwards. It's a paragraph. Work from the top down.
Consequently, total payroll for such jobs decreased, implying that the ordinance lowered the amount paid to workers in the low wage jobs by an average of $74 per month job in 2016. Evidence attributes the modest effect to the first wage increase. Okay, this to me doesn't sound like long-term any problems. And I think that's something that I brought up the other day.
That's
Right.
a different
No.
argument. That's a completely
No,
different
it's not.
argument.
It's not a different. No, it's not. My argument was twofold. One, that it's not necessarily true that a wage increase does stop jobs, as the paper I provided showed. There's one from Seattle that shows
older than this one.
Older than this one, that it does happen in some areas and doesn't happen in some areas, which doesn't argue against a minimum wage. It argues against a sharp increase for a minimum wage. And let's say, and we started this conversation.
Really
we started this conversation with saying that when we think economically, we have to think of trade-offs. If this is a trade-off, that for the beginning, for a little bit, jobs have a little fluctuation.
That's
No,
not substantiated by the data. You haven't proven that.
Why not? Why
it's
is
just
it
for
not
a little
substantiated
bit.
by the
You
data?
haven't shown that.
You
You haven't shown that this doesn't stand. This isn't a long-term effect. You haven't shown that.
We can show the effects of income inequality and how a wage increase changes the income inequality, because what it does it forces more money to be redistributed. It does force, and it lets more money be reintegrated into the demand side of the economy, not just the supply side of the economy, because we know that supply side economics doesn't work. Trickle down was a failure, right?
Okay,
so
hold on. That's a different thing than
it's not.
Arguing.
It's not because
I'm not arguing.
If we increase wages, that means that people at the bottom have more money to spend and shop, which is going to make employers, which is going to make employers grow and expand the business, right? To make use of these new markets that developed out of the demand side economy. A supply side economy doesn't have innovation.
Okay, hold on. You're arguing against trickle-down economics, and I want to make clear, I am not arguing for trickle-down economics. This is certainly not trickle-down economics, and if you think that, you've made an incorrect assessment. I can
How is it not
show you
trickle down?
why that is.
Sol argues that
I can show you why that is.
Okay,
I can show you why that is. Okay.
Show me why that is.
To start with, first sentence in the abstract, right? You mentioned when you increase minimum wage laws, you increase the money had by the workers, and that's not true. When you increase minimum wage, when you set in a minimum wage law, when you increase the minimum wage, less money, literally $74 per month less, is had in everybody's pocket. People have less money when you increase minimum wage, and the reason for that is less people are employed, and they're employed
except
for
when
less
you look
hours.
except when you look at the minimum wage increase in New Jersey and New York as opposed to Pennsylvania in the 90s.
Yours is all right. I'm just gonna go with
No.
Your
Why?
study is
Why?
literally 20 years older than mine. And not only that, but my study has
That doesn't change.
pages.
That doesn't change
I would like
anything. That doesn't change. We're talking about people who won Nobel prizes in economics.
Okay, that's literally an argument of authority, Dan.
No, but they're actually Juan. I really get really fucking tired, and I'm not trying to be mad at you about this idea of that's an argument from authority. Yes, it is. Yes, it is, because the argument from authority, the argument
of authority,
the argument.
You know why you shouldn't do that?
Hey, the argument from authority is only a fallacy when the authority isn't established to be an authority.
No,
yes,
it's not.
Yes, it is.
Your authority is
yes,
bullshit.
it is.
Your authority is bullshit.
No, it's not.
My authority.
No, I didn't say it is, but I'm saying I'm arguing for the fact that you're making a conclusive statement that minimum wage hurts lower income workers, and I'm saying the evidence there is inconclusive, because there is evidence from other studies showing, and I present them to you, showing that it doesn't necessarily hurt the areas, and it makes them more prosperous later on.
Hold on.
No, let me finish speaking. Because
sorry, I got a little heated there, and I apologize.
Let me finish speaking. Yeah. That increases their overall wage over time, the ability of people to participate in this economy. When we look at nations with higher wages as comparative, like per capita and comparative to the economies and all that stuff, people do better. There's more demand side for the economy. Employers companies are forced to innovate to capture those sectors rather than trying to control sectors by increasing their supply, so you're dependent on them, right? And then at the same time, while telling me that the argument from authority is any authority, which is just not true, it's an authority, it's not an authority. You said my paper is 75 pages long. That's like me going to the teacher and be like, why did he get an A when he had a 6-page paper? I had a 24-page paper. I couldn't give a fuck how long the paper was. right? So let's start.
Can I-
So let's start at the beginning.
Yeah.
You
Okay.
recognize that the appeal
Yeah.
to authority fallacy is only a fallacy when it's not an authority.
No, I do not recognize that.
Okay.
And in fact, I really would like to fight that. I think there's anyone listening needs to know why that's wrong. Needs to know why that's wrong. And in fact, you need to know why that's wrong, right? What you consider an authority is not an objective claim, right? Who is to say is an opinion. You don't know. Like, you can demonstrate only, let's say I'm a mathematician and I've made a lot of correct, you've given me a lot of correct problems and I've answered them all correctly, right? Just because I've answered a whole bunch of problems correctly doesn't mean that my argument for this next problem that you give me is going to be any more right than anybody else's arguments. What makes my arguments right in terms of solving a mathematical question is its validity in solving the mathematical question. It has no relevancy how many other mathematical problems I was able to solve. Hello?
I don't have a degree in mathematics, right? And I go on the board and I go to a room of 200 lay people. I go on the board and I show them, this is how you solve the math problem. And I'm able to convince them. And then someone with a PhD in mathematics comes and says, no, this is how you're able to solve it. And now the room has to judge who's right. Now, this is a problem in mathematics that 90% of the people don't understand. Okay? Okay. Are you an economist?
I'm not.
No, neither am I an economist.
Okay.
So this conversation is between two lay people. When we're sitting in front of that, would you tell me then, if I say I'm going to go with the PhD in mathematics as he's recognized by institutions, he wins...
I would never do that.
1 second, he wins
I would
Nobel
never do
laureate
that.
prizes, and you sat there and we have to say, I'm going to follow his directions on how one should solve this math problem, or what is the correct outcome of this outcome. This isn't,
Yeah.
I am not saying the proposition that their conclusion is correct because they're an authority. I'm saying that they're an authority and therefore we should take their proposition seriously. Now, if
Right, should be taken seriously. I
one
agree,
second,
should be
one
taken
second.
seriously.
Let's continue forward. So when I'm appealing to an authority, I'm not appealing to the authority for the veracity of the claim. I'm appealing to for the authority for why that claim is to be taken seriously. For the veracity of the claim, not the correctness of the claim. Because when I for example say Richard Dawkins said X, Y, and Z about evolution, and someone comes, no, Kent Hovind said the same thing. I go, no, I'm going to believe Richard Dawkins. Why? Well, he's an authority. That's not a fallacy. That's not a fallacy,
my friend.
No,
That's a
what
fallacy.
Richard?
That's
No,
a straight
no,
up fallacy.
no. What Richard?
Yes.
What Richard Dawkins is saying must be true because he's an authority is a fallacy. I said.
Okay.
Listen again to what I said on the
You
tape.
said you were gonna go with it.
Huh? I'm going to believe and take on the opinion of the authority.
Don't
That's
believe
not a
anyone.
fallacy. Okay.
Why do you have to believe anyone?
I
Why
mean,
can't you
when-
just look at the evidence yourself? Are you?
Because
you're wary enough. You're able.
I do not have the prerequisites.
Okay.
I do not have the
Here we go,
prerequisites.
here we go.
No. I don't have the
I don't
prerequisites.
think anyone is too stupid to read an economics
don't-
paper and understand.
Do you understand
I
how
don't think
degrees?
anyone.
Do you think degrees are worthless?
No, I don't think they're worthless.
Okay. Do you think if I go to my doctor, or I go to two doctors
Yeah.
and two of them tell me the same thing, that for me to believe them would be a bad decision? Because I could myself go through 4 years of med school, get an expertise in endocrine, get an expertise in
Doctors, by the way, are a perfect
get an
example, by
expertise,
the way.
get an expertise in endocrine. So I say it's not a fallacy for me to say I'm going to appeal to the authority
It
of
is
the
a
doctor.
fallacy. I'll
No,
tell you
it's
why
not
it's
a fallacy.
It's
A fallacy.
Doctors, hold on, Dan, you've been talking for a minute. Dan, doctors commonly recommend you get more than one opinion. Why do you think that is?
Because it's
Why would you need more than one opinion
it's
from a doctor?
medicine. Okay, no. Before we continue this, why did I appeal to the authority to begin with? Why? No, you tell me why I appealed to the authority to begin with.
Right. I think you were trying to substantiate the arguments, and you had no other way of doing that.
No, I said that Thomas Sowell has his research. These people have their research. We agreed from the beginning that economics is not like mathematics. We agreed from the beginning that economics.
What? Well, I didn't agree to that. I didn't agree. Oh, okay, hold on. I
You
know
think
what you mean.
you
Never
think
mind.
economics
We
is
did
like mathematics?
Okay, I didn't know what you meant by that claim. I do agree that there is like a give and take and a balancing that needs to occur in economics, and that I
No,
do
no.
agree.
Economics is not like mathematics, and there's no proof. There's no mathematical
Not
apodictical
like
proof.
economics. That claim of it's not like mathematics confused me. I know what you mean by that now, and I agree with you.
Okay, so we go to the doctors, we go to the economists, and we get many different opinions. Now, as we continue to look through this, it seems to be that this specific economist, that I have a list of them, I can give you 4 names, are winning Nobel prizes around their research. I'm telling you this. I'm not here to tell.
Dan, come on.
I'm not here to tell you.
Don't do that.
No, I am
Don't
not
do that,
here.
Dan.
No,
Don't do that.
What do you mean? I am.
You can't say the argument is more correct.
No,
because
you
they've
let me
been
finish
correct in
speaking.
the past.
Let me finish speaking. That's not what I'm saying.
Okay.
I'm saying the argument that minimum wage necessarily hurts the lower class is non-substantiated. Because in other circumstances, and in other research, it's shown to not hurt the lower class, which means to the layperson, you or me, there needs to be a recognition of accepting the null hypothesis that minimum wage does not necessarily hurt the lower class. Because you don't. There's evidence that points that it doesn't. Do you think there's enough sufficient evidence
There's evidence that points that it does.
Is there enough? Yeah, but is there enough evidence? Is the veracity of the conclusions necessarily lead you down the path that minimum wage is inherently bad?
I think it's further than any one specific argument and any one specific, let's say, measurement of the experiment, which is the market. Which I think is the conclusive evidence, right? I think it's very much so about the underlying mechanisms that are going on here, and the underlying mechanisms of why it is that minimum wage would hurt or help the minimum wage worker. And I'm trying to lay out.
Yeah, but
right,
you're laying
look,
rationalizations. You're laying and this is what I'm trying to tell you.
One of these papers is wrong. Your paper is wrong, or my paper.
No,
is
no,
wrong.
no,
There's only one right answer.
no. Why are you Mr. Dichotomist right now? Why is it one way or the other? Why could it be that your paradigm? Why could one second? I do not have the PhD knowledge necessary to take a look at these 2 articles that you say right now and tell you exactly what the differences here is. But what I can tell you is the burden of proof is on you to substantiate that minimum wage is necessarily wrong or necessarily hurtful.
Just did.
No, but I showed the other way with the other paper. Why do you just reject that?
Your paper is 20 years older, bro.
There's more. Do you want more? Do you know Nobel? Why do you just reject it? You just reject it because it's old. So now you're
okay. Hold on.
You're literally appealing to antiquity as a for the veracity of the claim. Literally, it's saying it's wrong.
Are you saying the market had no change in those 20 years, or that the market condition didn't change? Because it certainly did.
I don't. Okay.
After 2008,
just because it's
change.
What do you think? You tell me what is the changes that affect the outcomes of minimum wage between the 1990s and the 2010s?
Okay, one aspect I know hugely affects this is inflation, right?
No, how do you know that's inflation? How do you know that inflation? Don't just quote Thomas Sowell. How do you know that inflation does it?
Okay, I'll tell you how I know. Okay, hold on, Dan. Before I tell you how I know that, I want to establish that we can know things better than economists can, right? We can stumble upon.
Why are you so arrogant?
Why do you think the experts are so attainably knowledgeable?
Because I went to school.
What do you think that they can do?
I went to school.
Too.
Yeah. 1 second. I went to school.
Okay.
I went to school for psychology with a minor in philosophy.
Yeah.
Okay? I know what it's like to sit with professors who have a deep understanding of this knowledge. I'm aware of the time and work. 1 second. And when I speak to a layperson about psychology or philosophy, it's super clear to me that they don't know what they're talking about. Because they have not taken time and research in classes and were forced to prove their ability to understand and contend with these issues. You and I
Okay.
haven't done
This
that.
is-
There's a reason. There's
this
a
is
no.
my
So
experience.
no.
This is-
I have to stop this train right now. This train wreck of a discussion from recognizing that just because Thomas Sowell said something doesn't mean it is for sure right because he quoted in his book.
I agree.
There are other economists who say differently.
Okay,
There
hold
are
on.
plenty.
Nothing
There
that
are
Thomas Sowell
plenty.
is right.
There are plenty of good rationalization to also understand the benefits of a demand side to the economy, of how it actually helps workers to raise minimum wage. You are rejecting those because why?
1 second, hold on. Someone just knocked on my door.
Okay.
Okay. I am rejecting those because, right, to start with, I would say I don't value the Thomas Sowell argument any more or any less because of Thomas Sowell saying it, right? I evaluate based on the reality of the claim. Right? He's saying, hey, you're increasing the pool of people competing for jobs, and you're decreasing the ability of the employer to hire people, right? They now have to pay more per worker, right? Their unit of worker has just increased per pay in terms of that. I'm talking about the validity of that claim. I don't care who said it. I don't care whether he's white, whether he won a Nobel
Okay, but
Prize,
that
whether
claim
he has a
is-
PhD,
no.
whether he has no degree. It's about the claim. It has nothing
But
to
that
do with
claim,
who said the
claim needs to be verified by empirical evidence.
And it is.
Not in
It
all
is verified
cases.
by
Not in all cases.
okay.
If
You're right,
if
not in all cases.
Now, because I am not a PhD,
But in some.
because
But
I'm
in
not
some.
but in some cases it seems to do well, right? So what does that tell you?
I think
so-
in more so cases, it does bad than it does well.
What? How do you?
I
know,
think it does more.
Do you have? So this is what I'm trying to. I know that you don't sit and read economic papers. Neither do I. Right? Neither do I. I don't do it.
sometimes read economic
No, you
papers,
don't.
believe
You
it or
don't.
not.
You don't sit and study economics like this. You don't.
I
You
don't study it, no, but I'm
You don't take
subscribed to The
papers on
Economist.
it. You
What
don't
the
take. I'm subscribed to The Economist too, but it's not the same. To say
Okay,
I'm
well, those are
subscribed to.
economic
Let me.
papers,
Let me.
Dan.
Why do you? For me, it seems like you are just not recognizing what it takes to become an expert at something. And you are putting
Okay, I don't-
and
okay,
let me
hold on,
finish
hold on. Let me-
speaking. And you are putting your own rationalization, your own it makes sense to me because he described it in this way, as superior as the valid metric of reality, as opposed to the consensus, the understanding of actual experts. You're putting yourself in the center
Right.
of what is real, and that's what I'm saying. Where is this hubris coming from? That
I'll
because
tell you where
it
this
makes
hubris is
sense
coming
to you, it's therefore right. Tons of shit makes
Yeah.
sense to me. Doesn't mean
So-
it's right.
You're right. You're right. I'm a flawed individual. I may be wrong, right? I may be making some incorrect calculations, and I might be wrong. This is where my cube comes from, right? Just like you studied in college, I also studied. I studied physics, and I got a degree in physics and a minor in mathematics. Okay, and throughout my studies, like you, I sat next to many extraordinarily knowledgeable professors that had a firm understanding of the physics they were teaching me, right? They had like a substantialized claim over what they were teaching. They had years of experience. Many of them were published in a famous LHC paper that discovered the Higgs boson. They're very qualified individuals, right? And I've had the experience of sitting in this room every Friday, or every other Friday, there was a colloquium in my physics department. And in the colloquium, we invited speakers from different universities, all of them very knowledgeable in whatever claim they were making and whatever paper they were presenting. They were all published. They all had degrees from reputable institutions. And my experience while sitting in
But
these
those professors
colloquiums
don't have
was
any
always-
authority for the validity of their degree, right? Because it's really up to the argument.
Exactly.
How is that
Then this is-
exactly?
let me just finish. Let me finish my claim, and I'll
Okay,
tell you why it's
okay,
exactly
okay.
right. When we would sit in this colloquium room, huge room, with students, professors. Very few people usually showed up to these.
Okay.
It was usually like some undergrads, some graduate students, and the professors, right? And maybe the people that came with the speaker. And there was this ambience when questions were taken or when questions were being answered, that the validity of a question or of a claim was to some degree dependent on who asked it, right? The professors that were really disrespected, everybody kind of listened and kind of paid more attention. And the when the undergrads made like a stupid kind of like shaky voice question, less people listened, right? That was a thing I noticed. But what was stark to me was the fact that when the most respected professors answered questions or asked questions, they had no care. They had zero care over the, let's say, the ability, the qualifications of the speaker, right? So if like a really, like they didn't care that their question would be stupid. They were so like the most respected individuals seemed to care the least for the quality of their question. They were down to ask stupid questions, and not only were they down to ask stupid questions, they were willing to ridicule people that were notoriously intelligent in the field, right? They were willing to publicly ridicule them. And when I saw PhDs being publicly ridiculed for their claims, I realized it doesn't matter. I can study for years. I can study for decades, and these people won't respect me. The only thing that they respect is how much I can talk about what I know and how much I can prove what I just said, right? If the math bears it out, they respect that. They don't give a fuck where I got my degree from.
What is that? What does that matter?
Yeah, this is
what I just said.
What does it matter? Sure, I'll come back to our economics thing, right? It doesn't matter who the fuck said it. It doesn't matter who wrote the paper, what their name was, what school they went to, how many past recognitions they've gotten correctly or incorrectly, have they raped children or not, if they've gone to jail or not. None of that matters. The only thing that matters is the validity of their claim and our ability to determine that validity.
Yeah, but do you understand that in math, that the difference between mathematics and economy is there's a methodology? There's a methodology that yields statistical accuracy. There's a methodology
in math.
In math, there's no statistical outcome. There's no statistical outcome in math.
In physics, there is. And I studied physics, not math.
Yeah, okay, but in physics, there's a statistical outcome. Like, how likely is what the thing we're measuring is actually what we're measuring? Like,
of course.
Physics has internal validity versus external validity.
I mean, yeah, you never know that what you're measuring is only what you're measuring. There's always the possibility that you're measuring a random thing that you have no idea about.
Okay,
so new physics is always a possibility.
So when two physicists are talking about a paper and they're saying, well, that paper doesn't, like, especially in the higher echelons of physics and where physics is interacting with the unknown, not when you're just studying what is already known, right?
You're always studying the unknown, but yeah.
No, in school when you're taking physics 208 or whatever, you're not studying the unknown. Yeah. Right?
I mean, it is unknown to you, right?
You know what I mean? You're not literally at the edge of the boundary of knowledge and non-knowledge.
Okay. You said upper echelon, so I thought you meant like, okay, continue.
Okay, so there's a methodology to understanding these things. Now, what they care about is, in mathematics, they care about your argumentation. They care about what the facts are in front of you. But you and I don't have the ability to actually understand this. No, right now, you and I don't have the ability.
I disagree.
You don't have the skills to accurately research and understand economic papers.
What skill don't I have, Dan? What skill am I missing? Am I missing a critical thinking skill? Any math skill? Am I bad at understanding the beginning of the sentence and remembering while I'm at the end of the sentence? What argument am I unable? What thing can't I do?
You don't have the broad spectrum understanding of economics.
And why can't I learn about it right now?
I didn't say you can't learn about it. I'm trying to say that the reason why we're even having this discussion is because of your claim that minimum wage hurts workers and we should not have a minimum wage. Yeah. 1 second. And when I presented evidence from other thinkers, other professors, not older, they're contemporary. They're actually younger than Sol. Sol did most of his work a lot earlier. And I brought up all these. Let me finish speaking. Let me finish speaking. Yeah. Have ideas contrary to other thinkers in the field. Your response isn't, maybe I should suspend my belief that minimum wage is inherently hurtful and try to read all these other papers. You just doubled down and were like, my rationalization is true because it's making sense to me. And when I brought up an authority, you rejected that authority wholeheartedly and appealed back to your rationalization.
You're right. You're right. It's a mistake of mine. What I should do is evaluate your claim, the noble lord, like, right? I shouldn't dismiss him. You're right. It should not be dismissible. Understand the source of his arguments and why it is that he makes his arguments. However, nonetheless, I would like to mention the paper that I provided from Seattle is not by Thomas Sowell. Thomas Sowell did not.
Yeah, sure,
write
I know.
It. That's
fair.
That's fair.
That's fair. That's fair. What I'm trying to tell you is that I'm not saying here that I know for sure that increasing the minimum wage always helps the population. I don't know that for sure. Mm-hmm. I'm not an economist. But what I do know for sure is that I have not been presented with evidence that substantiates the notion that having a minimum wage hurts workers. Let alone having a minimum wage hurts workers, but an increase in the minimum wage hurts workers. My rationalizations and my biases and my priors lead me to believe that demand side economics is a much more powerful tool at improving the lives of people. And one of those tools is to put more money in the hand of low-skilled workers.
Why do you... Okay.
I understand notions of... I just want to finish the thought.
Yeah.
I understand notion of a monopsony, which occurs when people control a labor market, push it down. I understand notions of race to the bottom. I've seen countries and states in the United States that have very low minimum wage, or some of the most impoverished states in the country. There's all these. I believe in demand side economics. I think it makes sense. It works within my rationalization, but I'm not willing to say that minimum wage has been raising the minimum wage is automatically a good thing. I don't know enough about it. I would love to have a second talk with anyone, but for me, the thing that shocked me was your hubris on the issue.
Right. Sure. My hubris on the issue comes from the little that I've been able to understand about the arguments, right? About why it is that increasing the pool of unskilled workers would hurt the least skilled workers. Why that hurts them. That's why I have hubris, right? Because I have not heard a contention for that claim. I don't know why that would be wrong. Why is that wrong?
But your claim is not a claim. It's a rationalization. Right, you have the evidence, and you're rationalizing.
What is wrong in the rationalization?
No, because it's just a rationalization.
No,
it's not. A rationalization is not an evidence of a thing. It's the conclusion. You're giving me a conclusion.
The evidence bears it out. The evidence bears it out.
But when I presented other evidences that contradicted that, why are you refusing the
20-year-old evidence?
Dude, why do you keep now? You're appealing to antiquity, which is also a fallacy. Literally a fallacy. Just because it's older doesn't make it. Just because the paper that
time changes things.
Time
changes things.
Okay,
that's a fact. You're right. That shouldn't be the basis of my argument. Shouldn't be your study is too old. It should be
here
your study is wrong
one from 2015. Here, one from 2015 Economic Policy Institute.
Love it. Mine goes from 2018. But yeah, let's go. I'm down to evaluate.
Right, but that's the thing. There's one that's less old, 2015. This is irrelevant. Now we're at the point of the conversation that we're talking about. The fact that I just need to hear it from you. Do you still believe wholeheartedly that raising the minimum wage hurts workers?
To start with, no, I do not believe it wholeheartedly. Right, I came here with a spirit of ignorance, with a spirit of knowing and learning what it is that you might have to say and why it is reasoning that you have your good reasons for believing this. Right, I don't think you're any stupider than I am, Dan. I think you have reasons to believe what you're believing, and I'm down to learn those. And I'll be honest with you, I have failed in understanding you, and understanding the claim that I guess you're fully supporting, right? I know why you're supporting it. I know that you support demand side economics. I know that you want more money in the hands of the poorest people, and I want the same thing. I just think that minimum wage law is not the way to do that. And I've seen evidence and I've heard arguments as to why that is. And I can't prove those arguments wrong. I can't find a reasoning. You said my arguments are rationalizations, but I think like they're more than rationalizations. I think they're evaluations about the market and evaluations about the actual mechanisms that are underlaying unemployment, like the hours that are paid to workers per quarterly. Like it's this things are happening, right? Mechanisms are actually
Yeah, but you have a
occurring.
theory. You have a theory, a construct of how these mechanisms are interplaying with one another.
Yeah.
And the evidence that
Correct.
validates your construct is the one that you went, aha, that's the right one. Rather than saying, look at this contradictory and from other authorities who you first dismissed,
Yeah.
without saying, okay, maybe
Because they don't.
maybe the mechanism that I have in my head already understood and I think through is what I need to challenge here. Right? You
You're
have
right.
to
I
dare
do
to
need to
break your
challenge.
paradigm shift, and instead of even recognizing you were just stonewalling against it, which is my initial thing that we were even talking about yesterday. that
Okay.
Of
You're
course,
right. You're right. To start
of
with,
course, it's
I'm
not
not
necessarily true that there's so many other ways we can think about markets. There's so many other ways we can conceive of markets in which raising the minimum wage does help them. And there's evidence to
Okay,
also support
this is
that
the issue.
viewpoint.
Right. I would like to. You're right. I did do a disservice in not talking about, let's say, or discussing your paper and why, like, the validity of your paper. But what I have experienced, right, what's going on right now in my mind is I have an argument. I have an argument as to why the fuck this is happening, as to why it is that increasing minimum wage hurts the most vulnerable workers. I have a reasoning. And your paper that I have not read yet doesn't seem to answer the specificity of that claim. It seems to do a measurement, right? It seems to find the supporting evidence of like, let's see what's going on in the markets, but I don't understand why the reasoning to why that occurred is incorrect or is different than my reasoning as to why that would have occurred.
Why is it more correct and yours is incorrect?
Yeah, like what about how is it
so
that
for me,
increasing minimum wage law
okay.
didn't? Yeah.
Okay.
Like what other factors are occurring? Like what is it that's making
there's
it
many
that
other
minimum
factors.
wage
For
does help the
example,
workers?
unemployment rate. There are things that I do not have the knowledge and the priors. Just click on it, right?
We have
No, we don't have
Like,
the priors,
no.
bro. You don't have the priors. And
not
neither
the priors.
you.
You're right. We don't have the priors. We don't have the priors. You're right. But we can
Neither-
learn anything we want, Dan.
Neither is necessarily incorrect, right? Neither is necessary. It's not necessarily incorrect. What I brought up and what you brought up isn't necessarily incorrect. Can we agree on that?
Yes,
Okay.
I can agree on that.
What
I
you
can
brought
agree
up
on that,
isn't
of course.
necessarily correct, and what I brought up isn't necessarily correct.
I agree to that too. Yeah.
Okay, so the way in which in social sciences and in economics and stuff, you recognize whether a notion is true or not is because it's able to make market predictions and pulled levers, and you can use it to try to like create pragmatic results. Papers are not going to give you the coherency within the theoretical framework. It's not going to do that for you.
It's not going to explain the dynamics of the mechanism that are causing the
No,
variables.
you need to have an understanding of the theoretical frameworks to read a paper, look at its conclusion, and say, "Aha, this is how it makes sense."
You're
So just
right.
because-
You're right.
so
We
ju-
don't
so-
have that. That's why
so-
we look at Thomas Sowell, and that's why we look at the Nobel laureate
Well,
too.
Thomas
right?
Sowell is obviously an Austrian economist, and these other guys are
He's American.
No, do you not know the difference between Austrian economics, Keynesian economics, post-Keynesian economics?
Oh, my bad. Yeah. I thought you meant Austrian as in he's from
No,
Austria.
no,
I
no,
did
no,
not
no,
recognize
no.
it. Yeah. Continue.
Okay.
I didn't know he was Austrian, by the way. I did not know he was an Austrian economist. I don't know the different schools of thought. I haven't gone through.
Well, they all have different
Through the-
theoretical frameworks to understand phenomena. Thomas Sowell's theoretical framework, that census study validates it. Goes, okay, check, good, next. All these other studies, it can validate these notions. But these other papers validate these other theoretical notions. I really do believe that the veracity of the the evidence overall points to notions that raising the minimum wage helps the lower class. But I don't reject your papers from existing because it's not like they're throwing atoms or like they're doing physics experiments in the lab, where they're literally dealing with with continuous variables.
This is my thing. You think that my paper is a fluke?
No, I don't think that your paper is a fluke. I don't.
What do you think it is? Why do you think that what occurred in my paper occurred? What would have caused that?
I think there are tons of variables that cause like jobs going down, and I don't necessarily. I don't believe that raising the minimum. I actually do believe that if you raise the minimum wage really quickly, it does end up having that effect for a period of time. I believe that in incremental minimum wage raise, and one of the positions that we find ourselves currently in a really difficult position is that minimum wage has not kept up with inflation over the last 80 years of this country. Minimum wage, if it kept up with inflation, would be like $30 an hour today, right?
24, yeah.
24. I thought maybe it was 26. I don't even remember. Let's just say mid-20s. Let's just say 25.
Mid-20s, yeah, 25.
Okay? So with all of those, so trying to raise the minimum wage and catch up with that might have a trade-off. That in order to raise that minimum wage, we need to understand the trade-off of, we're going to have some job loss. We're going to have some hurt. But over the long run, when we reach that point, that labor demand supply point within the economy and adjusted for inflation, we're going to have a functional economy. We're going to actually have a middle class that was built because of the minimum wage laws of the 30s and 40s. Mm-hmm. Because of that top marginal tax rate that didn't allow wealth inequality. So within that framework, I absolutely see minimum wage helping, not just from the narrow framework of minimum wage hurts jobs in this specific scenario. And this is why I believe it. Now, am I going to say it's 100% true and that your studies are automatically false? No, I've never said that. I never said that. I was just saying that I think census data isn't the best way to run an economics paper.
Okay, well, my main argument didn't come from the census data. It came from the 2015 and again revised 2018 Seattle study. Okay. Right. And I would like to mention, right? You're basically theorizing, right? You haven't done measurement of, well, let's wait a long time and make sure that the middle class is built by this minimum wage and see if ultimately the worker class has more money in hand. I agree. I want the worker class to have more money in their hand at the end of the day, right? And I'm down to legislate in that favor. I just don't think that this is the way to do it. And why I think that is specifically this, right? There is a market competition between employees that are high skilled and employees that are low skilled. Right? They're trying to argue to their employer that they should be hired, right? There's no specific reason why an employer would hire 5 people to do X or someone that can pay 5 times to one person that can do X, right? There's no incentive for the employer to do one or the other. And so the employees are constantly fighting each other in that scenario. Now, once you put a law in place...
I don't understand why you think people should be fighting for $9 an hour. Shouldn't they be fighting for like 17? No, shouldn't they be fighting for $23 an hour? Shouldn't they be fighting for a job that allows them to live rather than fighting for a job that have them scrape by?
This is why. And this is actually a big part of that underlines your claim, right? You think that the worker who is paid the least amount in the United States should be able to live off of that wage. And yes. I don't believe that.
Yes.
Right?
I believe how can you I'm shocked to hear that you think that a person who works full-time shouldn't be able to live off that wage.
I agree. I know why you're shocked, and let me explain, right? Again, I still want the most money for the worker class, and I think this is how they achieve it. Now, let me explain why I think that, right? You think that the people who are getting paid the minimum wage are people who, let's say, have been in that job for many years, who have been trying and failing to get out of the minimum wage paycheck by paycheck cycle. But the reality is there are many people, many workers that are dependents, many people who do not need to pay rent, many people who would gain an incredible leverage with their employers if they were able to demonstrate years of successful work at a lower rate, right?
Why?
If you give the ability,
I don't understand. Why would I not say, okay, I'm working and now I wanna get ahead in the workplace, so I'm gonna show up on time. I'm gonna do good work, and I'm gonna move from $23 an hour. I'm gonna move to $30 an hour so I can go more out with my family. I can pay for vacation. I can get better things. It's almost like you're saying.
Say that again.
You're saying that the only way that they need to fight over scraps like hungry dogs to boost the economy.
I'm not saying they have to fight over scraps. Hold on.
Your argument just justifies the abuse of corporations. That's all you're doing. You're justifying their abuse.
No, I'm really not. Hold on. I'm trying to allow the bottom ring of workers, the least skilled workers, to have the most opportunity, right?
How will they
have the most?
I don't understand how if they have a minimum wage, they have less opportunity. It just doesn't follow.
Because they're competing with higher skilled workers. They're now.
Why are they competing?
Their capability to argue to the worker, to the employer, that they should hire them. Why would they hire you? You're really only worth $9. If there was no law, I'd only be paying you $9, and this guy I'd be paying him 14, and I'm demanded to pay 15.
Are you saying that? Are you saying that low skilled jobs that let's say $15 is the minimum. I'm a low skilled worker. And I'm replaceable, just like you're replaceable. It's a minimum wage job. Okay?
This idea of replaceability is wrong.
No, it's. Do you not know are you not aware of the turnover rate in these institutions, that people work two jobs, minimum wage, to like live in this country? That's what people are doing. They're replaceable. Okay. They get fired. All the turnover rate in these companies is massive. You're ignoring that reality. That they're not like staying there.
You're ignoring the reality that workers have a value to their employers.
Yeah.
You're ignoring that.
And that minimum value needs to be the ability. If you're going to work for someone, you should have the ability to live your life.
So hold on. Let me approach this from a different perspective. So for one moment, let's try to change it there. Okay. There are people right now in the United States that could get a job, or let's say there was no minimum wage for a moment, right? If there was no minimum wage, there's a lot of people that could get a job that actually don't need a job, right? They could continue living at home, continue going to high school, continue going to college. They could technically not get a job, but it would be beneficial to them to have a job.
Why would it be beneficial to have a job, even though they're fat? They live at home.
I'll tell you exactly why. Because having job experience and demonstrated, let's say, ability to show up on time, to work with your workers, to like complete projects, and be useful.
Yeah, so you don't have to be employed full time. You go and you do an internship.
What? Internships? Okay, the internships I think is a different argument. Let me just finish.
No, you just don't go and become a full-time worker. You work 20 hours a week.
Hold on.
You work 20 hours a week. And then
hold on. I feel like
you're much less available than someone's like, I'm going to be here 40 days a week. I'm going to work for your business 40 days a week.
Dan.
40 hours a week, my bad.
Yeah, it's okay. Like, I think you have this presupposition of what the lowest rung of workers is. You have an imagination that it's all these people that are living paycheck to paycheck.
No, I don't.
That have been doing this for 10 years. Hold on. They've been doing this for 10 years, that they're parents, that they have children, and that they live on minimum wage, and that they have 3 jobs, and this is the only way that they could do it. But you're ignoring the population of people that are like 16 years old that just want to work at McDonald's, that want to be an usher in like a movie theater, right? All those people, now you're demanding employers to pay all those people a livable wage. Now, what is caused by that, I understand the want for that. I understand why you want to give these people a livable wage. But these people don't yet need a livable wage. There is a class of people, there is a group of employees that do not yet need a livable wage. And through time spent working, during that time when they yet do not need a livable wage, they can argue the employer into paying them a livable wage once they become of age. Once they become, let's say, a full-fledged 40-hour member of the workforce. You're requiring
when you work part-time
to treat everyone as though they have a family, and not everybody has a family.
When you work, if you work full-time for a place, you should be owning a livable wage. If you work part-time, You can't live off of part-time. It's not enough money to live off of part-time. So while you're still dependent for your parents, you go and work part-time and you show them that you are worth employing full-time.
Part-time, you still have to pay them the minimum
But you
wage.
can't live
still
off
have
of
to pay
part-time.
$50 per hour.
So you can't live. So then you prove it to them that you can actually now be upgraded to work full-time. When I worked in group homes,
Imagine I could
when I worked in group homes, and DSPs would come and work with me when I was a supervisor, they would never start on a full-time basis. You start part-time, and after my recommendation, after a couple of months, they can be moved on to full-time if they show that they know how to do the job right. That doesn't change the fact that these employers were paid shit. They were paid the New York minimum wage, which is $15 an hour.
Okay. Let me approach it from a different point of view.
They were actually paid $17 an hour, and full-time employees would get paid like
people that you're not serving. There's a group of people that you're not serving. These were non-skilled,
non-college education workers.
You cut off at the beginning of that.
They were non-skilled, non-college education workers, and they had training that you have to pay them to train, right? There's laws around this so people can actually go and participate in the economy. You are arguing for a system that forces people to fight each other over basic necessities, to fight over privation.
They don't fight each other.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do.
That's the market. They compete. That's the best way to give people money.
Competition,
allow them to compete.
You're willing to have people compete just to live.
I don't understand how, this is the best way that we have found to give people what they need, to give people food, water, electricity, internet. The best way that we've found to do that is capitalism, is to give them
capitalism doesn't mean a free market can still exist with a minimum wage. Because it enables the market, it enables the people, the demand part of the economy, to actually require the suppliers to innovate and work for them because they have capital. When the bottom of the population doesn't have capital to spend and they're living paycheck, they can't actually create.
They get more capital. Your assumption is that they get more capital by increasing minimum wage. But I just showed you a paper that shows they get less capital.
Why are we going back to this? And I showed you paper that they don't.
A 20-year-old paper. I know I said that a many times.
No, and then I gave you a 2015 paper. And then I gave you a 2015 paper.
Oh, okay. I haven't seen the 2015 paper. Hold on, let me look at that. Did you post it in personal? My DM?
Let me find it exactly.
Yeah, it's fine. You're good. I'd love to see that 2015 paper. By the way, my paper ended in 2018. It was revised in 2018, and they literally concluded the same thing, more accurately, with a smaller error.
Where is it?
Yeah. I do think we are to some degree talking over each other.
No, we're not. I don't think. I'll send it to you right after because I'm going to have to start moving on to the next topic of the live stream.
No.
But
Yeah.
I'll send it to you and we can talk about it maybe another time. We'll have a second conversation.
I'd love that. I'd love to have an expert here with us.
Yeah, I can get Felicia to get us an economist.
I'd love an unbiased expert, maybe from both sides.
Fine, we can do that. We can set that up. I can try to set up two experts. We can have Felicia do that for those who don't know, Felicia is a person who helps the Pangburn community and the Pangburn content creators get guests onto the show. That's how we get our interviews going. So we can find people to talk about and bring them on. But the thing is that there are countries like Sweden,
I'll give you some names.
like a Casey in my chat said, Sweden has laws protecting collective bargaining, right? It's still capitalist, right? Just because institutions have a minimum wage doesn't mean it's not capitalism. The thing that makes what makes supposed to make capitalism good is the ability for markets to not be corrosive and to actually have fair competition. Even if we think from a capitalist perspective, or you can even have a free market socialist perspective, which also exists. But let's just look at a free market capitalist perspective. I think it's within the benefit of society that the financial power doesn't just exist in the upper echelons, and the minimum wage from papers that I've seen does put more money in the hands of people in the lower economy because they're able to live and spend and buy and make market decisions where when they were on the edge of poverty, they couldn't. And most people who enter the workforce should not be entering at the edge of poverty. And that's a moral argument that I'll stand behind. And I'll give you the last word.
I actually, yeah. I think you're not considering the fact that there's a population of people that would stand to positively gain from entering the workforce and that do not actually need a job, right? You're ignoring that population of people. You think everybody
when I was 16, when I was 16, I didn't need to work. When I was 14, I didn't need to work.
Let me answer me this. If there are people who do not need livable wages, why should they be paid livable wages when instead that money can go to people who actually need more livable wages, who actually require that, right? Why should a 17-year-old be paid a livable wage when there are many, many other family men and women that need that money that is being allocated towards the 17-year-old?
You can say that right now about any 17-year-old who works at a place. It's like saying no 17-year-old should then work at McDonald's because that money could go to someone else.
That someone else, I would say, has an ability to get a better job than that McDonald's job.
Not everyone does.
I would say that then they have a better argument for that McDonald's job than the 17-year-old because they probably have more work experience.
They're also going to work. They're also going to work full time. So I'm not going to hire a 16-year-old as a full-time employee. Prove yourself if you want to be a full-time employee. So you can work part-time. I'm not going to pay you. I'm only hiring for 15 hours a week, right? And I'll fill you in where I need.
Have to hire less. I can hire less people. I can hire less people now, though.
Okay, then
that you're not accounting.
What do you mean I can hire less people?
Hours being paid. Okay, hold on. It's not that.
If I need 10 people to work for me, and now you've increased the minimum wage, I can do two things as a corporation. I can say, okay, let me have more profits go towards those who are working, and I'll cut the salaries here. We'll cut things over here. We'll raise the prices maybe of the burgers or whatever it is a little bit to adjust for that. Or I can say, let me fire 2 people because they're actually redundant. Okay, then I fire 2 people who are actually redundant until the market fixes itself. Or in a situation where they raise the minimum wage by 60 cents, they're like, it's not a big deal, we'll be fine. Then in 2 years, they raise another 60 cents, and they keep going up and up and up, which might have a different effect than the strict $5 You can conceive of things like that, but it doesn't hurt those who are working there. It doesn't hurt them. It helps them.
I'd like to mention that I don't think any minimum wage that has ever been set has provided a livable wage. I think that right now, if
that's not true. Look at the 50s. Look at the 50s.
Again, I mean,
people were working minimum wage jobs and buying apartments.
I know what you're saying.
Buying cars. Yeah. Sending their kids to school.
No, I mean, I disagree. Those people that are buying apartments, sending their kids to school, have been in the workforce for decades.
There are people who came out of the depression in their 20s.
No worker should be paid minimum wage for more than 1 year. If that is occurring, that is a flaw of the worker, not of the employer.
That's psychotic. I can't. That's insane. If a worker is being paid minimum, it's the problem of the worker, not the employer.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you cannot,
that's insane.
If you have
no, I can't let you get away with that. I can't let you get away with that.
Yeah.
Because what if that sector? What if that's?
Let me explain myself.
Come to me. You're working at McDonald's. You're working as a Walmart.
Can I explain myself?
You're working as a Walmart cashier. Come tell me you want a raise.
Okay. What? You don't get a raise. You don't ask a conglomerate for a raise. That's not how that works.
Well, this is where I work. 40 hours a week. I don't have much skills anywhere else.
Okay.
And I'm not ambitious. I'm not ambitious. You're
not ambitious? How do you want a raise and you're not ambitious? The way that you get a raise, but if you work at Walmart, is that you leave Walmart. That's how you get a raise, my friend. You go to a competing employer that is willing to pay more. You go to Target.
Okay, and Target pays you. And does Target really pay their employees more? That's why everyone at Walmart. Walmart is a stepstone to Target.
And Walmart, yeah.
It's a stepstone to Target?
I mean that's how it is to some people. And then Target is a stepstone to something else.
Okay, and what if
So
I just
whatever it is
worked?
you want.
And what if Walmart pays me $25 an hour, and I go, well, I still want to make more money. I'm ambitious, so I go to Target that pays me $26 an hour, which is a stepping stone
Okay.
to a restaurant that pays me $32 an hour. But this whole way around, we didn't have people who are starving. We didn't have people who are living paycheck to paycheck. We had people who were able to live comfortable lives.
Right.
Why is
Those
it like
people
it's
wouldn't be
almost like you're?
okay, they-
it's like
people
you're saying
who-
the only
people
way that
who-
humans get motivated is by fucking dealing with privation.
Okay, hold on.
And that's insane to me.
People that are having we should have a standard of care that allows people, and I never disagreed with this, and I don't think you disagree with this, right? That allows people to move up in the workforce, right? Are you arguing that there is no competition between employers to hire valuable employees? Do you think there's no competition between employers?
Not at the lower rung, because there is literally a market that is controlled. Not necessarily totally controlled, but it's overwhelming. This is where we
Controlled by
have,
you're right, by the minimum wage laws.
But we literally talked about the fact that I brought it up already a few times.
Hold on. Continue.
There's a-
Sorry, I didn't mean to
there-
cut you.
I keep mispronouncing this word, but I've brought it up a few times already.
Yeah, I know.
Monopsony, yeah.
Monopsony.
Monopsony exists, and it exists within, especially in these fast food restaurants, because that's just how it works.
I don't know if that's how that works. I think I was
Because,
on
by
the
the way,
monopsony
I'm literally
Wikipedia,
looking it up.
and
Target
there
and
was
Walmart pay you the same for the entry level jobs. So you have to work there and get better and get paid
bullshit,
more.
bullshit. Hold
But
on,
there's
hold on.
no
Let me look that
reason.
up.
But there's
In
no
all
reason
states,
that
in all states, minimum wage of Target and Walmart are the same.
for the entry level jobs, yeah, depending on what state you're in.
It's the minimum wage. Yeah, I mean.
Yeah, so, but
Wait,
you get.
hold on.
But why is it that I need to gain experience working 40 hours a week, while not being able to live? It doesn't make you're the thing.
Because not every
the
worker is in
undercurrent-
that condition. There are workers
But-
that are not in that condition, and you're not
Yeah, but they
allowing
don't need to
them
work full
a
time.
place in the market. What?
Yes, they do. It's called part-time employment, because you don't have to pay them. You don't have to pay them health insurance.
You
don't have
can't
to.
demonstrate
You don't have to
your-
pay them. You
You
don't
can
have to pay
more
them
so
health
demonstrate
insurance.
your ability. You can more so demonstrate your ability to employers working a full-time job than a part-time job. That is, I think.
So you start
Obvious.
part-time when you're in high school, when you're young, when you're with your parents. The market still
Yeah.
exists there for these people, while they can also, go to school, live with their parents, save up money so they can buy apartments, they can participate in the market. Okay? Instead of working a minimum wage job when you're 16 or 17, just so you can pay for your car to drive to and from work, so your credit goes up, so you can pay
Okay,
for
right here it
Chipotle.
tells me Target raises its minimum wage to $24 an hour, which to me honestly sounds crazy. I get paid way less than that.
Go work at Target.
Literally.
Well,
No, I
the
actually
point.
really like my job.
the-
And Walmart pays $15 an hour, which is $10 less. That doesn't sound real. Let me look at this article again. Hold on.
I mean, it's $15 an hour. The point is that you can still have this level of competition you're describing if the minimum rung wasn't zero, but rather it was a livable wage. Because you can still work part-time. It doesn't disqualify anything.
Doing by doing that. Okay, hold on. What you're doing is you're limiting the choice of employers. That's what you do when you set a minimum wage. And hold on. Actually, let me read a quote from the article I sent you that I think is very relevant here. One moment. In short, no one is employable or unemployable absolutely, but only relative to a given pay scale. Okay? So people are only unemployable when you demand a law set between the contract of employee, right? When you demand the employer to pay a certain wage, then now the employee has competition between other employees.
They anyhow
arguing
have
that
the
they are worth
competition
that
at
amount.
whatever they still have competition wherever that lowest rung is.
They still have competition wherever that lowest rung is? No, but you're increasing the competition, right? Because all of the people that would have been paid any amount under the minimum wage now have less argument for that pay versus those people that were being paid more than them. As an employer, why would I pay an employee $15 an hour when he was worth $9 an hour before, when I can hire
No,
a worker that was being paid $14 an hour before.
People aren't worth $9 an hour. An hour of
People
a
are
person's
worth
time.
whatever they agree. People are
No,
worth whatever they agree to be paid.
But that's how you get literal people working in
How
mines
much-
for cents.
How much? Let them fucking. Okay, hold on.
Okay,
that would never happen. That would never happen.
It did
That
happen.
would
It
literally
does
never
happen. Juan, stop.
Never
Stop.
happen.
Stop. No, you have to stop.
Yeah.
It does happen. It happens
Nope.
in other countries all the time. People work for pennies. People in the United States worked for dimes. They worked. There were 8 people in a fucking bedroom. Why are
Okay,
you shaking
you
your
have
head?
a massive misunderstanding. Doctors in other countries get paid less money. Do you understand why other doctors in other countries get paid less money?
Doctors.
Like
They're
lawyers get
minimum
paid
wage
less money. Do you
employees.
understand why?
Yeah, because of the way in which it's relative to their economy. They don't need as much money.
Right, and so obviously the bottom wage is also relative as much as the top wages.
People in
So-
Africa live for fucking dirt water. Right?
I mean, some of them in Africa. Africa's a big place.
They can barely afford. They can barely afford to. They don't even have the access to clean water. You're saying that the
Some
only
people
way
in Africa don't have
you're
access to clean water. I agree.
Yeah,
Well, I don't-
you're
okay,
sa-
this is
but you're
starting
saying
to be
that.
straw manning.
No, I'm not trying to straw man you. I'm just. To me, it's mind blowing that you think that the only way for that you eliminate our competition. I don't want competition between the lowest rung of workers. We should eliminate the choice of employers because then we don't have
I agree.
homelessness and starvation.
You don't want. Hold on. I agree. You don't want competition by on the lowest rung of workers.
But
and
that's
you're
what you're saying because
Hold on, you're increasing competition.
I need work so bad that I'm willing to undercut your $15. And you need work actually more cut, so you're gonna undercut that to $9, and we're gonna do that all the way down until it's like, okay, I can subsist at this level. Because people are willing to work.
Employees. There's a market for employees. Employers are battling each other just as much as employees are battling each other. They're competing to hire the best worker.
But what are they competing for? What are they competing for?
The best worker.
What are
Better
you
work
competing
less
for as
money.
the worker, Juan? What are you competing for as the worker?
More money.
And how much are you willing to take if you're a non-skilled laborer?
As much as they're willing to pay me.
And what if that's $7 an hour?
Okay, you see, this is all
Listen
coming
to
with
me.
the assumption
What
that
if
I
that's
haven't been working. This is
We're talking about entry level. We're talking about entry level non-skilled worker.
Okay, so I'm 17 years old then, right?
You're 18 years old. You're 19. You're 20 years old. Let's make a difference.
No, okay. I can start working at 15
Not all.
in most states.
If we look at let's just look at the average age of minimum wage
I can
workers.
start working at 15 in most states. I gave you 2 years after that. I'm 17 years old then, right?
Average age of minimum wage workers.
I'm gonna love this.
What?
It's far lower than you think it is.
People under the age of 25 are under 1/5 of those who get paid minimum wage.
Okay, let's look at this. What is the average age of a minimum wage worker though? Is there a median and a mean? I would love those two numbers. Yeah, I'm looking too. 2021 age. Minimum wage workers tend to be young, although workers under age 25 represent nearly 1/5.
Yeah, so only 1/5 is under 25.
They made up 40. Hold on, chill. They made up 44% of those paid the federal minimum wage or less. So 44% of people paid minimum wage are under the age of 25. Among employed
and then everyone else is
teenagers,
over the age of 25.
Among employed teenagers, 16 to 19 paid by the hour, 4% earned minimum wage or less, compared with 1% of workers aged 25 and older. Okay, so people that are above 25%, above the age of 25, only 1% of them are getting paid minimum wage. People between 16 and 19, 4%.
Where are you reading this? Where are you absolutely reading this?
BLS.gov.
Yeah,
I'll give it to you right now.
I'm literally looking at that same statistic, and it's literally if 44% are under the age of 25, that means that everyone over the age of 25 is the other 56%.
I think we're making some incorrect here. Let me give you this
No.
article because I literally just read a paragraph, right? Let me read it to you again, right? Minimum wage workers tend to be young, although workers under age 25 represent nearly 1/5 of hourly paid workers. They made up 44% of those paid by the federal minimum wage or less. Among employed teenagers 16 to 19, paid by the hour, 4% earned the minimum wage or less, compared with 1% of workers aged 25 or older. That's literally what it says right there.
Yeah, so it means that out of those 48% who's paid minimum, those are the ones under 25. The rest who get paid minimum wage percent are over 25. So only about 44%
Although
of minimum wage workers are under 25 years old.
Hold on. Minimum wage workers tend to be young, although workers under age 25 represent nearly 1/5 hourly. They made up 44% of those paid the federal minimum wage or less. Yeah, okay, yeah, I don't disagree. Maybe I disagree. So you're saying
So the other
66%
56% are over the age
56%.
of 25.
Yeah, but there's a lot more people over the age of 25 than there are young people, right? The majority of people are older people.
Yeah. So what?
I think
It doesn't mean it
what
means
we're not
that
accounting for is the population size.
56% of all
Yeah.
56% of all minimum wage
Federally
workers
minimum wage or less workers, yeah,
are
over the age of
over the
25.
age of 25. It's 56%.
That's right.
Okay, what percentage out of Americans? Let's see. What
Which
percent
percentage of that American?
of Americans work for minimum age?
I'm done.
Eighty-two point three million people,
Would love a percent.
making up 58% of all wage and salary workers in the United States. How many people earn the federal minimum wage? According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, 1.6 million workers, or 1.9% of all hourly paid non-self-employed workers, earn wages at below or below the federal minimum wage. That year, 82.3 million people were paid hourly rates, making up 58.1% of all wage and salary workers in the United States. So this year, that number represents 58% of all workers in the United States.
So 58% of people are getting paid minimum wage?
Yes.
Okay, and you're getting that from BLS.gov?
USAFacts.org.
Okay, hold on, let me read that. USA minimum wage in America. It's got like a pink thing on the top. Hold on.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, right here, 58.1. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, 1.6 million workers, or 1.9% of all hourly paid non-self-employed workers, earned wages at or below the federal minimum wage. 1.9% of all hourly paid. That year, 82.3 million people were paid hourly rates, making... Okay, that 58 isn't... No, it's not 58% of people are getting paid minimum wage. 58% of people are getting paid hourly rates.
Okay.
You're wrong. It's 1.9% of people are getting paid minimum wage. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics,
I'm looking at also spend out.
So it's not
1.4% of hourly workers age 16, 1.4 hourly workers age 16 or above earned the federal minimum wage or less than that. Amid the harsh economic conditions, one of the main questions is what percentage of Americans make minimum wage. According to the data from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, the total number of wage workers in the United States age 6 was 1.1 million. Of these hourly workers, only 17% earn exactly $77.25 per hour, while the staggering 83% made below that. Of these numbers, okay.
It's literally 1.9%, Dan.
No, 1 second.
There's a graph right here. In USAFacts.org article, minimum wage America, how many people are earning $7.25 an hour? There's a graph that shows from 1980 to 2019. and it shows a massive
Oh,
decrease.
it's at minimum wage or lower. So some people are making like a couple of cents more, right? So I guess the better question is how many percentages of Americans earn a livable wage?
You piece of shit.
No, because that's
Well,
because
you should have set the minimum wage to a livable wage, I would say.
you're right. We should, because maybe people are
you
gonna,
should've, so that I could really disprove your argument. Now your argument isn't it's literally
no. That's the whole
unprovable.
point. That's the whole point. That people, even if you're
It's
earning,
fine,
even
it's
those
fine.
who earn,
This was actually part of the other part of the argument, right? And trying to find counter arguments to this Thomas Sowell idea that increasing the pool of workers will harm the least skilled workers, and in trying to find an argument to that, I found that the best counter arguments had to do with the fact that some people hold on. Damn it, I lost my train of thought. Fuck. It was actually an important thing. It'll come back to me. Hold on. Fuck. Before.
well, I think the point that I'm consistently trying to push forward is that minimum wage. Let's just start with this. No one can live on minimum wage. You know this. I know this.
Yeah,
Exactly.
What's that? So even if you did
wait. No one can be even living on minimum wage. So it's horrific to think that like 1 million something people are living out of that million. Around 500,000 people are living on minimum wage over the age of 25. Right? We can recognize
1.6 million people, and over 1 million people are having to live on it.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay, so
half of them have to live on that. More than half of them.
More than half of them have to live on it. Okay.
Yeah, which is, you agree that's horrible, right?
Horrible. I agree.
Okay.
We should do something about it. I agree.
Horrible. And then out of those who are 16 or younger, who make minimum wage, those were even less. That means that we have 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds in parts of this country making more than minimum wage.
We do, yeah, of course.
We do.
We have millionaire 16-year-olds. We have millionaire 16-year-olds, yeah.
That means that we don't have all the numbers. There's still, what this means...
There are millionaire 16-year-olds, though.
Huh? Yeah, sure. There's millionaires. Yeah. There's millionaire babies.
No, but there are like 16-year-olds that started with no money and that made $1 million. Those people exist.
There's many people out there, but they're seldom. They're not very common. Okay.
Right. Agreed.
So when we look at these people making minimum wage, if we raise the minimum wage, what would change? They would have less work now?
If so, these people. Wait, hold on. What population are we examining?
This 1.1%.
1.9, right?
1.6. No, it's 1.6 million. 1.1%.
Oh, of people that need the livable wage, right? If we increase minimum wage.
Yeah.
So some of them would lose their jobs, right? It's hard to say what percentage. But some percent of them would lose their jobs.
And then wouldn't, because they need to work, the employers will be like, okay, we're gonna have to move money around and we're gonna have to hire some people. It's gonna get offset because, as we've shown, it keeps going back to the same point that you're consistently.
Wait, what do you mean it gets offset? I didn't understand
no,
that
one second.
point.
You're going back to the same point. We're saying the only likely conclusion that they're going to lose their job, and then you base that off of that paper you brought in, rather than actually talking about the merits of raising the minimum wage. You're consistently appealing as the only possibility.
Hold on.
This is this is where I think we're having. This is why we're having such a hard time having a conversation, because you're consistently not recognizing the agnosticism of your position.
What are you saying that I'm saying wrong? I don't understand.
You're not recognizing the agnosticism of your position.
Don't say that. I don't think that's a valid claim.
Do you know what that means?
I know what that means, and I'm not being agnostic about this claim. I have a reason for believing this.
That's your rationale to justify that empirical reality. Because
What's
you're not
wrong
willing
in
to
that rationale?
You're
Can
not
you argue against that rationale, please?
You can't argue against a rationale without providing other evidence and a different rationale. And when I provide the other rationale, you dismiss it wholeheartedly.
Okay, hold on. Let's talk about that other rationale real quick.
And when I'm consistently telling you that it's not necessarily going to mean that they're going to lose their job. You're saying, and they're going to lose their job, as if that is the necessary, absolute outcome. We're going back to that position.
Why wouldn't they lose their job? What would incentivize the worker or the employee, or I'm sorry, the employer?
Because he
to
needs
not
the
fire them?
employees. He needs the employees.
He needs the employees.
He's
So
already
hold on. So
he's
selling
already
a product or a service, right? He's selling a product or a service, and so he needs employees. I sympathize with you.
They don't
He
do
needs
charity. They
employers-
don't do
employees-
charity, right? They don't do charity.
Yeah, he needs employees to provide the service or the product, right? So that he can
Okay.
keep getting money, right? So I think your claim is coming from this idea that, and you're trying to minimize this, and I sympathize with it. I also want to minimize this. You're trying to minimize employers who are taking more.
We have
more
another
share
we have
of the
another
cut
8
than they
minutes,
should
and then I
be.
really have to move on. We have another 8 minutes.
All right, well
and I
that's
re-
fine. No, if we can. I feel like we've been going in a bit of circles, but I'm down to pick it up some other time.
I really do think that like you're really not open, and you're really unwilling
Mm-hmm.
to recognize that rationalization is not the only possible rationalization.
I'd like to know
Because
the
when I
rationalization.
because when I bring up
yours.
when I bring up the rationalization, you just say, but they're gonna lose their jobs, and I go, no,
Why
not
wouldn't
necessarily.
they? Why wouldn't they lose their jobs?
Because at the end of the day, the employer needs the employees, so he's going to raise the pay and cut costs somewhere else. And now at the bottom rung, people are no longer going to be competing for privation. They're not going to be competing for just putting food on the table. They're always going to be competing for a livable wage. That means that if I want more in my life, if I want to, I'm still going to have competition, because I want to have a better life. I want to be able to save money. I want to be able to go on vacations. I want to be able to support my family
Didn't
and
get
buy
that
nice
last part.
things.
Let me try to understand. Let me say back what you told me and tell me if I misunderstood it, right?
Okay.
You're saying if we increase minimum wage, the employer still has to hire just as many people, right? They still need to hire they had 2 people making sandwiches on the subway. They still need 2 people making sandwiches at the subway, you know? And so now they'll redistribute the money and they'll pay them more. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, because they still need someone working there.
Okay, that to me would be great if that occurred, right? If somehow it was
Pause. There is research showing that occurs.
There's research showing that doesn't occur.
Oh, stop. We started again with saying there is research showing that does occur. And there's also research showing that doesn't occur. That doesn't mean that your rationalization is true and mine is false.
It doesn't mean
and it doesn't mean that my rationalization is true and that yours is false. Which is why we're getting back to why is it that you're so, when I bring it up, you don't go, okay, that could work within that framework. You just double down to, they're going to lose the work.
I mean, you're doing the same thing. You're
No,
doubling
I'm not.
down.
I've been
they're not
saying the
gonna
whole
do the work.
time. I was telling you the whole time, yes, it could happen that they lose the work. But I do think that people shouldn't be working. I'm saying even if that does happen, does happen, I think that the minimum wage balances out over time. And we can explore that.
You don't know that.
But I'm
I
not
would
telling
love
you.
for that to be the case.
I just said we can explore that. Right? I didn't say I
Okay.
know that we can explore that, but you're just dismissing it. You're not saying that's...
I don't know if you said... Okay. That's fine.
You're just dismissing it. You're not saying that's
I'm
an
not
interesting way to rationalize it. That's an interesting way to think about it. That that does validate the studies that show that it does help the economy and it does help workers and it does alleviate income inequality. There are studies that do that, but you're just sticking to your point because that's the one that makes sense. And I'm not telling you that I'm...
because it 100%. It's because it's the one that makes sense to me.
We're gonna have to
Yeah,
stop.
it's yeah, for sure. Thank you. It's as far as my rationale, my limited, non-professional, non-economic degree having rationale has been able to take me. And now you may say that is not far enough, that I should appeal to authorities greater than I that have demonstrated ability in this field, and I should follow their speech. And I think that their speech, I can find argumenters who are from Harvard and who are from Stanford and from wherever you want that say both things. That say what I say and probably that say what you say. And I think that signifies that to some degree this conversation has become politicized. That there is some external value that someone, neither you or I, have in trying to make your argument or my argument happen. And so now we have to truly evaluate the methodologies of these studies, the actualities of the scenarios that are being experimented upon, the lurking variables that might be possible, and truly come to a conclusion on, let's say, a momentary conclusion, at least on the studies that we can witness. Again, I hope we could do this again sometime, maybe with some more professionals in the room.
I think you have two choices: either go to 6 years of school and become an authority, or appeal to the authorities. Like that's really the situation.
I don't think so. I don't think we have to go to 6 years of school to know whether or not.
No.
Experiments.
I'm saying that because never mind. Just I'll talk to you. It was fun talking to you. I'm actually super hot. I gotta open a window or something. I'm like, it's literally 82 degrees in my room right now. I wish I can show everyone my thermostat.
Yeah,
it's
for sure.
82 degrees. Look at this shit.
You have a cool
degrees
thermostat
right now in the room.
Yeah,
it's actually
for sure. I got a cool 70.
I'm so hot. So
you are super hot. All right, Dan. It was super fun talking with you. I appreciate your time.
Fun.
Thank you. I hope we could do it again.
Thank you.
Talk to you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Oh, God. I felt like I was going in circles for like a hot hour over there. Whew. Should I have cut that shorter? Maybe I should have cut it earlier. I don't even know. But I'm excited to bring my friend on, my very good friend, to talk about Russia. Another friend might join us a bit later. He's a little late. This whole thing is super late. So give me a second. I'm going to pause the audio. Maybe I'll play some music or something, and I'll be right back. I just have to open up a window. Actually, I can't play music. I'm just going to pause and be right back in like 2 milliseconds. There we go. 2 seconds, everyone. 2 seconds. Whew. Okay. Now to the meat of the discussion, what everyone wanted to talk about, which is Russia. Russia. They got me. The Russians. Putin's not my friend. Okay, I'm about to put on my good friend Everett. He'll introduce himself however he wants to introduce himself. Give me 1 second. Can you see my camera, Ev? Okay, let me just get... Oh, there you go. You're visible now. Perfect.
Oh my gosh.
Everyone can see you.
Hello, everyone.
I just have to fix your face. Okay. So introduce yourself, Ev.
Fix my face? I think it's already fixed.
No, I have to fix your face.
Okay. So I work in politics, and I guess for this conversation, my undergrad degree, appealing to authority is in political science, and my thesis was actually in Russian automotive history. So I'm not exactly like a military historian, but I do love this stuff and do enjoy strategy. I'm not exactly sure what we're going to be talking about tonight. So,
well, really, we're really just going to discuss what's the main thing that made me want to even do this conversation to begin with is what seems to be a very interesting time within Russian politics, with the Wagner Group seizing a city and convoying towards Moscow. I know when I first saw this the other night, literally last night, I was like, oh my God, is a civil war in Russia about to happen? What's going on? This is crazy. One of the indicators that I found historically intriguing was the fact that they painted the Z on their tanks in red. And Putin even said, we're not going to let this happen again, the red and the white army type of situation.
Interesting.
So that's like what I really found interesting about that. And I thought that you would have much better perspectives than I would on the issue. And Raj as well, but he's not here. So
Yeah, so I mean, I guess we can talk broadly about like what's happening, which is essentially a collapse of authority in Russia in a lot of ways.
okay,
There's a number of things and a number of like intersections that we could
okay.
go down. So maybe we want to start just talking about what the hell happened with the Wagner Group.
Just let's talk about that.
So it's still really fresh, and again, I'm not like an expert on like current events in Russia. But what seems to happen, and this is something that's been developing for some time, is that Prigozhin has been more and more very critical of the Russian administration, including Putin, but also of Sergei Shoigu, who is one of the
So who's that? Who's Sergei? Sergei what?
Sergei Shoigu.
Okay.
He is one of the he's a minister of defense, and he's high up in the defense
Okay.
department of Russia, and basically both him and Prigozhin have had this ongoing kind of feud and fight to the extent that like Prigozhin was accusing the Russian army of not sending them enough munitions for the push on Bakhmut.
Okay.
And other things dealing with strategy. Basically, Prigozhin as a kind of independent actor that is only really loyal to Russia so insofar as they can pay them, was kind of a thorn in the side of Shoigu.
Okay.
So in my understanding, and what I think has been going on, Prigozhin has kind of been very aggressive and is almost trying to position himself as a successor to Putin. And
Okay.
what we're seeing in a lot of ways is that there's a number of strongmen in Russia that have like independent armies or regional armies. And one of the people that has been silent on this news story at the very least is Kadyrov.
Who's that?
So Ramzan Kadyrov is the kind of strongman of the Chechnyan Federation or whatever, the Oblast. I don't exactly remember which
Okay.
kind of provincial title he has, but he has his own independent army essentially because the Russian Federation has varying degrees of internal autonomous states. And many of these states are ethnically based, like Kadyrov's state in Chechnya, and that's where the Chechen wars were happening. And a lot of these more semi-autonomous states have been on the front line, and most of the recruiting in Russia has not necessarily been from the internal population of like the Russian Homeland Corps around Moscow and St. Petersburg.
Interesting.
But from these areas like Chechnya, who has a history of war and has that kind of military experience that's been built up. But also, there's a number, like there's like a dozen other Russian ethnic enclaves that are around like the Ural Mountains, kind of north of the Caspian, north and west of the Caspian Sea, and north of Kazakhstan. And so one of the things that I'm looking at now is that Kadyrov actually offered his troops to stop Wagner. So we were essentially going to have a rogue mercenary group that is, for the longest time, was replenished by the Russian prison system. They were basically saying, hey, prisoners in Russia, you can either stay in prison or you can fight for your freedom with the Wagner Group. And so the Wagner Group is particularly interesting because there are a lot of people who were criminals or criminalized in the Russian court system. Basically, if Stalin was to send all Gulag prisoners to the front, is what that is. But now we have, because Kadyrov has a degree of like independence, he's offering to shut down the Wagner Group under Prigozhin. So we have a couple of actors like Shoigu, like Prigozhin, like Kadyrov, who are all vying for power
In Russia.
in Russia, and this is a clear indication to me, at least, that Putin doesn't really have a full control over things, especially when you have the intervention of Lukashenko. And Lukashenko essentially said that and Lukashenko is the premier or the president of Belarus.
Belarus, yeah.
Yeah, and he's been a satellite of Putin for a long time. He has his child as his successor, so he's often considered the last dictator of Europe.
Okay.
But basically, when the Wagner Group revolted, Lukashenko sent over some people and said, and negotiated a truce, more or less. It's still very tenuous as to what the hell is going on. But the notion that Wagner is marching towards Belarus suggests that in some ways Lukashenko basically stole Wagner out from underneath Putin.
Oh, he stole him in a sense.
Yeah.
Taken him under his own sphere of influence, and in a way is now able to position himself with power, not just strengthening himself from simply being a satellite state, but as having pull with Russia, not just being down into Russian whims.
Exactly.
So it's a massive loss for the Kremlin.
Yes, especially since the Wagner Group, I believe, is like 500,000 troops around.
50,000, I think.
50,000. Right, 50,000. And the Wagner organization is actually quite broad. They're actively operating in the Central African Republic. There's a civil war going on in there. And the Central African Republic state actually hired the Wagner group as their security team. So we have a bunch of Russians in Central Africa fighting for the Central African Republic state against rebels, essentially. I don't know that much about that conflict, but Prigozhin essentially has two different sources of income, and he just lost his contract, more or less, with Putin. And
well, I think he was like, I'm done with this contract because of X, Y, or Z reasons. And from what I read is that most of his statements, he's not against the war in Ukraine by any means. He was just saying that like Russia is not, the Kremlin is not sending money. They're not replenishing the troops. They're not sending equipment, and they're literally just dying out there. Right. So they have to turn back and go towards Moscow and just do it right, in a way, take power.
Right. So Prigozhin has a vested interest in maintaining the health and operations of his troops because they're his employees.
Yes.
And the conflict of resources, it seems like, because the Russians don't seem to be fully resourced within either in providing it to the Wagner Group or providing it to their own troops.
Okay.
It seems like they are having a lot of troubles with logistics, especially since the Ukrainians keep targeting logistics and targeting munitions, and there's some suggestion that, like, for instance, I read that India actually is no longer receiving Russian arms troops as part of the agreement, or arms deal, not arms troops, but India has agreed. Oh, excuse me, I just ate some food. India has an agreement with Russia to help modernize their military, and Russia has not been sending those military equipment to India, to the point where India is now looking for other people to buy military equipment from, including the United States.
This is actually something that I was speaking with Raj about the other day, which is the reception of Modi coming to the United States, and some of the problems that, surprisingly, the far left and the progressive left, I think he thinks, fall short in. Is that it's that same type of alien, like India is a world superpower. If we don't, they're going to go to other countries that might be our competitors. Like,
right, I would probably more describe them as a regional power. They haven't really thrown their weight around too much outside of their immediate neighborhood.
Okay.
But they are on track as one of the BRICS countries, which is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and sometimes South Africa. They're on track to be one of the major powers in the next century, or this upcoming century, rather. Especially since they have such high population, and they've also lifted like most of their population out of poverty in the last few decades. So they have like a lot going for them, but they're not necessarily as like they're not as active as China, let's say, in like Southeast Asia or in the South China Sea, where they're making ocean like island bases. They're not doing deals and contracts with the Palestinian Liberation Organization, which like China just did. China has a bunch of investments in East Africa in particular, and in South America. India is not doing the same thing.
Okay.
So China has a world footprint. India has yet to get there. We can certainly talk about that, but I want to like
No,
make
no.
sure that
Let's circle. Let's circle
Yeah.
back to the Russia issue. Yeah.
Yeah,
There's a little tangent that we can move away from.
right. So with that said, there's been a lot of power shift with 50,000 troops having literally just secured Bakhmut being
And then
taken
left.
off of the front line.
Yeah.
And the same thing with Kedyrov, because Kedyrov is also on the front line, fighting, or at least a bunch of Chechen troops are, as far as I understand. Him offering to come off the front line to kill Wagner is essentially a low-running civil war amongst paramilitary groups in Russia. Especially, like, the Moscow took it very seriously and essentially did anti-terrorist actions and prepared the city for a siege.
Yes, I saw that. That's one of the things that I saw. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's where we're at, especially, and it's really interesting with Lukashenko because I think they just put nukes in Belarus.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, I think they just shipped them over. I think they made an announcement, if I remember correctly. So Lukashenko went from being a very dependent proxy, economically, socially, and otherwise, not politically. He's managed to maintain independence from Putin, which is like, I can't imagine how he played that game, but he basically ran out the clock. And then got a bunch of nukes in the last couple of months, and then got the entire mercenary army that is essentially somewhat, like Putin said that they were treasonous. So their judicial status within Russia is somewhat undetermined. They could either be...
I actually just read that it was reported by the AP, CBS, and New York Times said that they struck a deal that Russia's dropping the charges.
Right.
So long as they go to Belarus.
Oh, interesting. Okay. So that's really good for
Lukashenko.
Belarus. Yeah.
Lukashenko brokered the deal between Putin and Wagner. And Putin's pro. How do you pronounce his name again?
Prigozhin.
Prigozhin, yes. I always go say Prochinsky because that's like a UFC fighter. Prigozhin,
oh, nice.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's a huge power shift for Lukashenko.
Massive.
Especially since Lukashenko has a successor. An obvious, it's his son. I think his son is still relatively young. But Putin doesn't have an obvious successor. It might be Medvedev.
No, he doesn't.
But Medvedev was always kind of neutered under Putin. So there's a couple, strongmen in Russia who are now somewhat equal to Putin. Like, I don't think Lukashenko has ever dictated terms or like met on and negotiated as an equal with Putin. Like it's quite obvious that Putin's hand has been greatly decreased, I would say, since the beginning of the Ukraine war.
And the conflict, yeah.
Yeah, and this is all happening at the same time that the Ukrainians are really pushing to make a lot of headway.
So this balkanization of the military, which is what it seems like you were describing, right? Where like they're it's I'm thinking of like historical knowledge of like Rome and the generals kind of like deciding to kind of do their own thing and control their own territories. Do you think this is going to lead? Like, do you see this as like the beginning of like the Russia losing control over its army, over its people, in a way, or like what does this indicate?
Oh well, they already lost control over their mercenaries. Their control over the Chechens is tenuous at best. If you ever look into Kadyrov, he's one of the most autonomous individuals in Russia.
Okay.
But at the moment, he backs Putin, and we'll see where that goes in the future. But there's also other groups that are smaller generally. And as far as like looking at like a Roman collapse or balkanization, it's kind of difficult to tell because the Russian core is so even with their population problems after the Soviet Union, where they basically started losing a bunch of folks, the Russian or like their population stagnated. The Russian core is so much larger than any of these like ethnic subgroups, but the ethnic subgroups are growing faster than the Russian population.
Okay.
So we're seeing a massive demographic shift. Not massive in the sense that it's happening rapidly, but in the sense that it's unusual for the power dynamic in Russia, especially since the ethnic relations between those groups and the Russian people and the Russian state, czarist or otherwise, has been a history of essentially ethnic cleansing. If you look at the Stalinist era, he literally moved the Tatars out of Crimea. Thousands of them died. For him to just move what remaining population is back, and the Tatars are like kind of like the native population, the steppe peoples. They were really large population during the various Crimean wars between Russia and the Ottomans, and the Crimean wars between Russia and like France and the UK. So like the Crimean Peninsula historically has been one of Muslim steppe people for centuries at this point. And steppe peoples well before that, where now the majority population is Russian.
Okay. So what's tie that to the earlier point. I lost you along the way a bit.
Yeah. So the demographic shifts suggest that certain areas in Russia won't necessarily be able to be controlled by the Russian core, just by virtue
just by the ethnic diversity of going on, as the Russian core has been a project of many of ethnic cleansing, as you were saying.
Right. So
okay.
Historically, especially if you look at World War I and World War II, Russia fought a lot of their wars just by throwing bodies at it because they had so many Russians to throw bodies at.
But now they don't have that many bodies, as even.
Right.
And even for the mercenary groups, they're using not citizens but prisoners or Chechens or other people from other ethnicities. Okay, I see.
Yeah, so the Russian armies primarily are, I believe, if I could be wrong in this, but I believe the plurality of the Russian army is still Russians. It still has that the draft, but a lot of Russians fled the draft.
And are very upset with the war to begin with. Russia has a whole system.
Right, and this is in the context of population stagnation for about a decade after the collapse of the Soviet Union. So the demographics of Russia is really imbalanced, where there's like a lot of older folks who are from the Soviet Union, who remember the Soviet Union, but the younger folks, that population is much smaller because they essentially didn't grow in the 90s.
Okay.
And so now the population that's fighting on the war front are those Russian people who are from or who were born in the 90s, in the late 80s and the 90s. Because that's like the age of people that go to war is like 18 to 30-ish. I don't exactly know the Russian.
I think you and I are at the top age of that age range, but yeah, it would be people like my younger brother or one of my younger brother's friends who would be fighting in the war right now.
Right.
I mean, I wouldn't be drafted. I'm too fat to be drafted on the front lines, but
whereas the Wagner group is any
prisoners,
any criminal, any individual or citizen that the Russian state has deemed as criminalized, and I say that in that specific way because the Russian state can throw it's political prisoners that's on the front line. It's
I see,
and that's something that they also did during the Tsarist phase. Like there's a lot of the origin of the Red Army is actually from political prisoners that were forced to be on the front line, and then they refused, and then they shot their.
And that's a parallel, with what we're seeing now with the Red Zs on the tanks of the Wagner group. Right. Which is why Putin was like, automatically no treasonous, we're not doing this again. Right. I see. This is why he was saying we can't let this. I just want to pause real quick because I have to pee. But before I go pee, and you can entertain people in the chat if you're interested. This is why having background and knowledge of these situations and in general is super important when we analyze information and analyze data, because when we don't have that background, that academic background that we study, you can't make sense of situations in the same way. But so I'm gonna go use the bathroom. Give me 1 second, and you can talk to people real quick. I apologize. I've been on for a while, so.
Sure. Let me just find where that chat is. Way better convo. I agree, Scott. Do you guys have any questions? That's the only thing that I see. Funny that he invites me on and I'm suddenly the host. Yeah, so I don't see anyone engaging in the chat. Oh, where Putin be at right now? No idea. Probably somewhere remote and safe. Definitely, I would guess not in Moscow, because they tried. I'm pretty sure Ukraine or possibly other Russian separatists supported by Ukraine have been trying to drone attack him. I remember some vague reports about that, but I think that was something behind the drone attacks in Moscow. He's definitely not on the front line, though. That's for sure. Not like Prigozhin, who has, a crack team that is probably very loyal to him at this point. Just the same with Kadyrov. Putin does not have the same thing. Oh, no worries. No worries about the lags. Where he probably isn't is anywhere east of the Urals, because they literally can't drive or take trains out past those mountains at this point due to various environmental and economic reasons.
Okay. Were you just quiet the whole time?
No, there's a little bit of engagement. We talked about where Putin could be.
Sorry, I can't hear you. My headphones were unplugged. Give me a second. Okay. So, what were you talking about?
Just a little bit. Scott said way better conversation.
Yes.
Casey was asking where Putin was, and we talked a little bit about, or at least I monologued a little bit about where he could be and probably isn't. He's probably not in Moscow. And Casey said, yeah, he left Moscow. We talked a little bit about the drone attacks on Moscow.
That's true. There was drone attacks on Moscow.
Yeah.
So we last left was the parallels between the same type of ethnic things and prisoner thing, the Red Army, and the way it worked with the Russian Revolution. This is 1917 we're talking about, right?
Yeah, 1917 through the Russian Civil War, which lasted several years.
Okay.
And to some extent, the Russian Civil War is a continuation of the World War One. And like the Winter War in Finland is a continuation of that war, which is for the Russian perspective, there's a very good argument to say that World War One was also World War Two. Like there were some breaks and pauses, but Russia still claimed like ownership over Finland and the Baltic states and Poland.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But we don't necessarily need to get into that history if you don't want to.
No, I'm just thinking about it all together, right. Like how that plays out. Do you suspect that with the way in which historical trends are looking and what we're seeing now, do you see this continuing? Do you see this trend repeating itself, or do you think it's going to be novel? And if you do think it's novel, how do you think that novelty is going to look?
So I don't necessarily think it's going to repeat exactly, but in form perhaps. And this is something that we really haven't seen in Russia in a really long time, like centuries. Like this is the normal medieval history of Russia is very fractious, like 1,000 little different princes of Vladimir and of Yaroslav and all these little princes that eventually consolidated around Moscow. But we would probably see some similar return to that if the Russian core actually fractures into different factions. If the Russian core does fracture to different factions, then we will absolutely see independence movements from these various ethnic groups like Chechnya.
Okay.
And to that extent, Kadyrov is an obvious warlord in the future, or is well placed to be an obvious warlord in the future to kind of conquer the northern Caucasus regions, like the areas north of Azerbaijan, and the areas currently in Russia.
Okay.
Between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea.
And that's kind of what you think the Chechens are gonna, if it does happen, we'll seize control of.
Yeah. So, like, if Putin dies tomorrow, there's going to be a massive power vacuum. The succession is going to be challenged at this point, obviously. we could easily see Lukashenko, instead of being afraid of the West, turn east.
Try to get support from China. And what are they called? The BRICS?
BRICS, yeah.
BRICS.
Yeah. Okay. So, like, for instance, from Lukashenko's perspective, he has no chance against NATO. What he does have a chance against is a failing Russian state. The Eastern Mongols of Russian. Yeah. There's tons of like Siberian peoples. There's I don't think Russia really has any strong or control over the area east of the Urals, which is this mountain that kind of signifies the corner of Europe.
Okay.
Most of the Russian population is west of the Urals. There are a bunch of them that are in and around the region of Kazakhstan and in some other areas of the stands in Central Asia. But basically, just an example, more and more of those Central Asian nations are becoming economically dependent on China and not Russia. And for instance, like Armenia in its fight with Azerbaijan recently is part of a Russian defense pact, but Russia didn't respond to them. Russia didn't actually say that we will defend you, and that was a major blow to the prestige of Russia and to the reliability of Russia, of which most other Central Asian states, which are former Soviet states, are also in defense pacts with Russia and have deep economic ties because of the history of the czars and the history of the Soviet Union.
And China and NATO are both threatening that.
So NATO is threatening the West, particularly with Ukraine. They're moving. So Ukraine, Finland, and Sweden have all kind of said that they were going to join NATO's orbit. And to that extent, Georgia probably will too. They've tried to join the EU, and there's certain separatist movements that are preventing that. But in Central Asia, China is going to have far more of a impact, as well as some other states that might be able to project into that area, like Iran. Okay. Because Russia is just not going to be able to logistically get out there because they're fighting in the West, and they have mercenaries running around uncontrolled for the most part.
I mean, very uncontrolled. They're right. They're going straight at Moscow, literally straight towards Moscow.
So, like, what does Lukashenko do with a mercenary group? He either can stay with Putin on his side and send the mercenaries to attack Kiev, which might be an option if the war starts turning into Russia, which doesn't in Russia's favor, which doesn't look exactly favorable at the moment.
Yeah, or especially with now a loss of a mercenary group, and probably a lowering of morale. Now, I mean, this entire I was someone messaged me about this, and they talked about they're turning back around even if they don't make it to Moscow. I was like, yeah, but I think it's in many ways we have to recognize how symbols and how these moves actually affect the population at hand. People are going to see this was almost happened, right? People are going to lose trust in the Kremlin. People are going to, right?
Yeah. So there's actually a really good point with the symbols, especially with the red Z's. Okay. The only thing Lukashenko needs to do to win is nothing at this point. But what is interesting about Lukashenko is that he still runs a Soviet-style state. And this is true to the point that the KGB still exists in Belarus.
Interesting.
And
I did not know this.
Yeah, so in Russia, after Yeltsin, they kind of redid everything. And like, Gazprom used to be this Russian kind of Soviet-controlled entity that was state-run. Now it's a corporate entity that is affiliated with the Russian state and Putin's court, potentially. Like, all of this is very feudalistic in some ways.
Okay.
But what Lukashenko could do is say that Putin was a massive deviation from what the historical norm of the Soviet Union and the good old days is, which there's plenty of Russians still in Russia that are favorable of the Soviet Union, especially if they grew up in the 70s and 80s. So I think there's 30% are still Communist Party, and Putin has just basically ignored them.
I see.
But the symbology of of Lukashenko and Belarus is far more nostalgic of the old days of Soviet Union. So in that respect, there's a really good argument for him and a really good narrative for him to say, hey, we have all these troops, we have all of the Wagner group who are these like hardened criminals that went through hell to get the only victory that Russia ever had in Bakhmut, essentially.
So
And
Lukashenko could literally like make Belarusia the new Russia.
Yeah.
He could try to overthrow Putin in many respects.
Yeah, he could march to Moscow, especially if Putin is no longer there. Like, if Putin is no longer in the equation, there's a power vacuum, the best person in that system to make a move would probably be Lukashenko, because he's the only other head of state that's independent. We talked about Kadyrov, we talked about Shoigu. Both of those people can make a play as leaders of the military and leaders of a semi-autonomous regional like enclave. But yeah, Lukashenko definitely has a better play, especially since he has a successor. Nobody else really has a successor, as far as I'm aware. I see Scott asked a question.
Yeah, before we get to Scott's question, there's one more thing. Do you think that with the obviously the failure of the Russian army in Ukraine right now, and do you think that, let's say the Russian army consistently gets beat, is losing, do you think that will increase the likelihood of Lukashenko to make plays or decrease?
Oh yeah, it'll increase the likelihood. If the Ukrainian counteroffensive is successful and they like retake Mariupol, which would be a massive symbolic victory, then I think that would be an instance similar to what happened in World War I, where the Russians just kept losing, and then eventually the army mutinied and just turned around and marched towards Moscow. Something like a symbolic victory for Ukraine like that, and taking Mariupol would not only be symbolic, but it would cut the land bridge to Crimea. And we should talk about Crimea, but if the Russian army continues to lose under Putin, they're going to start blaming him.
In the same way Wagner blamed him for their losses.
Exactly.
And turned around and marched on to Moscow.
Right.
This motif is playing over again. Okay.
Right.
And people like Lomachenko, who is running a Soviet-style country, can reignite those passions or whatever it might be.
Right.
So,
right.
So let's go to Scott's question, and then we'll turn it back to talk about Crimea.
Yeah. So. We did talk about the conditions under the military structure turning on Putin. That's basically losing. Like if Putin loses, he's done. He's not going to have any allies. They're all going to. He might have some allies. We'll see how that plays out and where the chips fall. But I do think it's possible that if he tries to activate a nuclear weapon, and this might be one of the reasons why he hasn't, that the command structure will just say no. They might not necessarily turn mutiny on him, but they may say no. I think that's an entire possibility.
But let's say even a tactical nuke or some sort of nuclear weapon is dropped. Do you think that? I mean, obviously that would be horrific for the whole world.
Yeah.
It would fuck everything up.
Right.
But do you think that, like Scott says, that military structure will just turn on Putin and say no? It's going to schism the country apart in a way, or the military apart.
Yeah, so I think it would add pressure. It would add a variety of narratives to the situation where Putin is actually a crazy motherfucker and he's killing Ukrainians, which are like the cousins to Russians, right? Mm-hmm. So they have they're distinct histories but related histories. It would be like Sweden dropping a nuke on Copenhagen, right? I think it would fracture the military quite a bunch. There probably still would be loyalists, like there was for the White Army back in the Russian Civil War. But there would also be plenty of people who would be so demoralized and so disillusioned with the Russian state, and particularly Putin with themselves, that they might just abandon ship. They might not even turn around to try to overthrow things. It's more likely that individuals just desert and try to go home and find their family. Okay. And that's a massive historical understanding in the Russian Civil War as well.
That's a lot of what happened during
Yeah.
that break. A lot of people just left and went to go to their homes or their families
Yeah.
or whatever it might be. Okay.
Yeah, they said, "Fuck it, I'm not going to be in the trenches. Let's go home."
No, that's fair. I mean, I would do that.
Yeah.
Okay, so how does Crimea play into this? What's the significance of Crimea that you wanted to bring in?
So Crimea is massively symbolic, right? It was annexed in 2014. It's primarily Russian population, and if Russia loses Crimea, which it won in a series of very bloody wars between the Ottomans, like I said earlier, I don't have to necessarily rehash. But most importantly, they lose their naval base in Sevastopol, and there is no similar naval base in the Black Sea to project power. Like they'll still have the kind of eastern coast that's above Georgia, which is where they had their Winter Olympics. I'm forgetting the major city name, but historically that place is called Circassia, and also is going back to the ethnic thing. Just as a quick tangent, the Russians under the Tsars in like the late 1800s like slaughtered the Circassians. Like
Okay.
they they still exist. They're a disparate population, but they're a minority within the natural homeland. Like the one soldier that surrendered to Ukraine, and even there's been enough soldiers that have surrendered to Ukraine that have turned around and started doing raids into Russian lands. Yeah, it's a really interesting development where the Ukrainians are supplying them and providing intelligence support into and crossing the internationally recognized Russian border as separatists.
So this historical motif is playing itself out even more than I thought it was.
Yeah.
Like it's really playing itself out. Okay.
Yeah. So with Crimea and losing Sevastopol, the other best naval base is probably Azov in the Azov Sea, which is like, if you look at the map, it's Sochi. Thank you, Scott. Yes, Sochi is the city. That was the Circassian capital back in the day, and now it's a Russian vacation town. So the Azov is another naval port that's kind of near Mariupol, but that's the only place for the Black Sea to really go at that point. So the Black Sea, once it loses Sevastopol, would have to either go into the Azov Sea, where it would be blocked in by the Kerch Strait Bridge, or and at that point they're like ducks in a pond, fish in a barrel. They would be shot down by artillery immediately because the Azov Sea is not large. Or they would have to sail all the way around to the Baltic Sea in St. Petersburg or Vladivostok, all the way, or Arkhangelsk. In like those are the three major ports that Russia would have left. So thank you, Scott. So that's the naval implications, especially since there's a resource implication that I think Russia was trying to secure, was that there was natural gas and oil that was found relatively recently in the Black Sea off the coast of Crimea within the economic exclusion zone, which is the 2 or 3 nautical miles that are off any nation's coast. Yeah. That they have exclusive economic rights to those. So beyond that, Crimea is really hard to hold right now, especially since the Ukrainians are trying to cut the land bridge. They already tried to bomb the Kerch Strait Bridge, which Putin constructed after the annexation in 2014. That was like one of his major infrastructure projects, so that he could actually supply Crimea from the east. But right now they have to supply Crimea from the north around Kherson, and the really interesting development that happened recently was the breaking of the dam.
Yes, correct. Yes, I read about this.
And so the breaking of the dam is a humanitarian crisis, obviously.
And I know that Russia is blaming Ukraine for it.
Ukraine is blaming Russia. I think, given that Ukraine wanted to cross the Dnipro and secure the land that goes up to the Crimea, I don't think they would have done it. It doesn't really make tactical sense. But it seems a bit of a scorched earth tactic, because when the bridge blew, or the dam blew, which it could have been just weakened previously and then a natural event broke it, it made the nuclear power plant, the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, much harder to run. So they actually had to shut it down and reduce the amount of energy that was being delivered to locals. But also, it flooded the banks of the river, more so on the east side of the bank, which is the Russian side, where they built all these fortifications, as opposed to the west side, which is where the Ukrainians were preparing to fight. So
Which is
the
also a classic Russian motif of retreat and burn the ground.
Right. Yeah, slash and burn or whatever it's called.
Yeah.
I'm sure someone can give us the right term there. But so they basically cut their losses because now the Ukrainians, once the water subsides, can just go over. It's going to take a while. It might not be feasible until fall or winter, which gives the Russians some time to like shift troops to the east to try to make sure that they can hold what's going
Refortify
on.
their position, yeah.
Yeah, especially since the Ukrainians seem to be pushing towards Mariupol and cutting off that land bridge to Crimea. But eventually, that position's not going to be sustainable to hold. So the Russians basically just bought themselves time in exchange, even despite having like really fortified those positions. They flooded their fortified positions, which they could have tried to hold. So we have a situation where the Russians are basically abandoning the Dnipro waterfront, and at the same time, the Wagner Group is abandoning the Mariupol front in Donetsk. So the Russians need to now move people from the Dnipro to the Donetsk in order to hold those separatist regions and to hold Mariupol.
Which gives the ability of Ukraine to push into Crimea.
Right, especially since Scorched Earth, yeah. Especially since they just lost 50,000 troops, right?
Yeah.
It's off the board for Russia.
Yeah.
And the biggest issue with the dam breaking is that it messes up the water canal that goes from the Dnipro to Crimea.
Okay. Is that the humanitarian part or a military strategist part?
Beyond the flooding being a humanitarian part for the people immediately living on the east side of the bank and the Dnieper River, they just lost all their homes. Thousands of people need to move. The only water that Crimea really has is that canal. So they've just jeopardized the entire water supply to Crimea, which is primarily Russian. So that is the massive international humanitarian crisis that nobody's really talked about yet, as far as I could tell, but is looming very quickly. Essentially, most of Crimea is not going to have drinkable water, and if you know human physiology, we can't really go without 3 to 5 days without water.
No, we can't.
So, my own preference, one, this gives a really good justification for Ukraine to intervene in Crimea and say that this is a humanitarian intervention. This is not like a conquest of the Russian majority population.
I see. We're not. There's no conquest here. We're just coming in to do aid. But by doing aid, they're establishing specific military spots, trade spots, logistical spots, which
and establishing control over the Black Sea, which is one of Russia's major import routes, right? For goods and otherwise. But also, it could be a justification for the UN and even NATO to get involved with peacekeepers in Crimea, and just so. Crimea might not even need to be invaded by Ukraine from a very tenuous northern strait. There's a couple avenues in. None of them are very good, especially with modern artillery. The only other way to get into Crimea would be through the Kerch Strait Bridge to the east that goes towards Sochi. So it's much easier to have peacekeepers land in Crimea and have the Russian troops there surrender or retreat than it is for Crimea to try to push across the Crimean Strait, or Ukraine to push across the Crimean Strait. So I think Russia basically has just lost Crimea already. They just don't know it yet, and that is a massive symbolic loss. And if they lose Crimea, they're probably going to lose Mariupol, and then it's just a grind.
I mean, that's just going to be a domino effect all the way up.
Right, and then it's just a grind between the separatist regions of Donetsk and Luhansk, which maybe Ukraine does want to go there, maybe they want to like negotiate a reintegration into Ukraine, and just because at that point, if Russia fails that badly, they have way bigger problems, like we talked about with
the Chechens,
with Kadyrov and with
Lomachenko.
Shoigu. Yeah, that's, I think, if we get that far, that is like the catalyst for the Russians to really, really turn on Putin.
Okay. Wow, that was amazing. I feel like I get it's a lot more of it's making a lot more sense.
Right.
But I have to ask you, minimum wage. What's your take on minimum wage?
Um, so I agree with you. I think minimum wage is really good for circulating money through the economy. And I think this is a more of a modern monetary theory, which I encourage people to check out. I don't
Me too.
necessarily subscribe to any one economic theory because sometimes they work in some scenarios, sometimes they don't. But according to MMT, modern monetary theory, a lot of the problems that we run into with recessions and boom and bust cycles is not necessarily jobs or unemployment, but how well the money is circulating through the economy. If the money is stagnant in a bunch of wealthy people's or wealthy corporations' investment accounts, then it's not moving. It's not being invested. Like Elon Musk can't use all of his money. He just physically can't. There's too much of it. He doesn't have literally like the capacity of a human being to really conceive of how much money he has. So there's even with Bill Gates, who has a lot of charity, he has so much money that he can't get rid of it quick enough to really put that money to use. And I'm specifically talking about a concept called the velocity of money. And the velocity of money is how money is utilized and how like for instance, just a basic thing. If I pay you $10 for halal food at a halal stand,
Love
right?
halal food. Who doesn't love halal
Love
food?
it. Who? Yeah, exactly.
No,
Very.
by the
neat.
way, if you don't like halal food, you gotta go get a tongue transplant. You have to recognize that you have a deficiency and you have to move forward.
Especially since halal is very healthy for you. But if I buy $10, that is $10. That's the velocity of money. That's the momentum of money. That $10 is then going to be used by that halal stand to buy ingredients. That's $20 of velocity of money for a $10 bill. Whoever that ingredients were bought from, they invest it into something else. They buy themselves dinner somewhere else. That's
correct. Yeah, people on the lower economic strata use their money. They don't save exorbitant amount.
right.
They don't.
Right.
They don't move it around. Right and like.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's really getting towards like, is the money being utilized as the money is supposed to be utilized? It's not just sitting in a pot growing on itself with interest, which is I would say a different type of inflation. If we all just put our money in a bank account, then it just inflates on its own. It doesn't need anything else other than that to just grow itself. That's just how investment works. But if we are able to use our money, we can actually provide value to individuals and other corporations and small businesses in particular. And that's where you get to the value of a living wage that's indexed to inflation, I would say, where we have a guarantee that some amount of money is going to be circulating at the bottom and not just trapped at the top.
Yeah. For me, the biggest way, and I try to get that across, and the way I conceive of it is that within a market framework, when the wage inequality, the wealth inequality goes towards the top, it gets it doesn't. There's no pressure of suppliers or corporations to really serve the needs of the bottom because they're just buying to live. They don't have the ability to even make that choice. Well, I'm going to buy somewhere else. I'm going to buy more expensive. I'm going to do this. They don't have that. They just buy what they need. And therefore, there's none of that competitive structure between the suppliers, as would happen when the working class has money, just from a straight like market analysis.
Yeah, I would agree with you. Like, there's far less demand if the entire population doesn't have money to buy things, which is where you get like things like stagflation that happened in the 80s and certain things like the market with the housing bubble in 2008 really incentivized people to buy, even though it is so risky, so that it would look like people were doing economic activity that they actually couldn't afford, and that was an internal market manipulation. That wasn't the government doing that, right?
Yeah. Well, Everett, it's like 11:20, and I have to end this here. Man, of course, I love you. We should talk more often. I think you should definitely do more of these more often. I know everyone else who's listening loves you. There's nothing else except messages in my DMs. Who is this guy? Why haven't we talked to him sooner? So, of course, Everett, thank you. And we'll continue talking afterwards a little bit.
Much appreciated. Happy to come back on.
Of course. And again, thank you so much for everyone who's been listening. I think I maybe took the conversation with Juan a little too long, and then I didn't have as much energy, but I think Everett took it home and slam dunk. Thank you so much. Absolute Chaz. Thank you, Raj. Raj, by the way, was supposed to be in the chat with us, but he got hung up with friends in the city. So, another time. Peace out, Everett.
Take care. Good night.
Good night. Yeah, guys, that's it for the show for tonight. We'll do this again. I'll clip it up, and I'll give me ideas for what you guys else want me to talk about. You know what? I can finish that Tim Pool video. I think I got to do that. Yeah, so that's it. And remember, as always, stay thinking. Have hubris. Don't think that your rationalizations are true. That's my message for tonight. Dare to change your paradigms. And that's all. Night, everyone.